Oh, look, I got to get some.
Oh.
Look at that stuff. We got to get it.
My mom just got a bag of that, actually.
Is it good stuff? Good?
She says it's the best.
Is that the best?
She says it's the
if
best.
If it is, I'll be in Washington, D.C., hopefully in the Oval Office. I'll send for popcorn. Okay?
Appreciate it.
Hey, what's up, everyone? What's up, all you freaks and disasters? By which I mean everyone with compassion, everyone who tries to do the right thing, be a law-abiding citizen, play by the rules, make an honest living, because you have to be a freaking disaster to be that kind of person in this kind of world. Hey, it's your guy to the 21st century, Nate Houseman, and in honor of Charlie Kirk, I'm retiring the word empathy. I mean, I like it. I think it's a good word, but compassion is probably a better word. So, yeah, it's been a while since I've given you a podcast live stream like this. So, and I know I've promised to cover some other topics and I forgot what they were. And I need to look up that past stream. And I don't want to do that because unlike a lot of people, I don't like the sound of my own voice. So I'll have to grit my teeth and do it. But we're going to talk about the economy in this, in this program. We are really 29 days. I'm recording this at like 3 a.m. Wednesday, October 29th. We are 29 days into the latest U.S. government shutdown. But this government shutdown is different from the ones we've seen before. Before, it's always been about the debt ceiling. How much do the Democrats and Republicans comparatively want to pay and spend? And will we reach the debt limit or not? This one is about just funding a continuing resolution that was passed already by the House. The Democrats in the Senate are blocking it. That's why it's being called the Schumer shutdown. Chuck Schumer is the leader of the Democrats in the Senate. And it's all about giving healthcare money, like Obamacare funding, to illegal aliens. That's the hill they're wanting to die on. And they really, when I say the hill they're wanting to die on, I mean the left, the deep state players, as that's what Drew Report would call them, they're running out of cover stories. They're running out of disguises. They used to, mask their cons and all sorts of idealistic and fancy la-di-da, good intentions, but it's all smokescreen. Now they're out in the open. So really they've gone from pleasant, deceitful con jobs to open threats. Like, the Democrats need illegals as part of their election fortification system. And we're going to go over some of that. But I'm going to go through several tweets that I've collected on different topics. One, the shutdown. Two, how government overreach is hurting the economy and has hurt the economy for many decades. And also, we're going to go back in time to like the early part of this year and discuss what Doge found, all the waste and fraud that they uncovered, and how it relates to this, and how it relates to paying off the national debt and getting out from under the thumb of the central banks. Because whatever you might say about the Freemasons or the Jesuits or even the Jews, the financial system is where the rubber meets the road for the deep state corruption. It's the practical, enforcement arm of all the corruption. If you go bankrupt, you're done. And the banking system has the whole world through the U.S. dollar as their debt slaves. And those who kiss the ring of the banking system, they become Uncle Sam's sugar daddy, as you see in the meme. So we're going to start with this tweet by Wall Street Mav, and he's reacting to Peter St. Ong. Wall Street Mav says, 20 days of shutdown and Republicans still haven't folded. Miracles happen. The reason the shutdown is helping Republicans in the polls, while financial markets barely noticed. Keep it going, and we can actually start paying down debt. all the time in the past, government shutdowns have been a media disaster for the Republicans. But Wall Street Mav is responding to Peter St. Ong, PhD. And Peter St. Ong says the shutdown theory could in theory last to 2027 because unlike past shutdowns, there's no debt ceiling to scare financial markets. Nobody needs a deal. If that miracle happens, non-essential layoffs are permanent, and we start paying down national debt by the trillions. And how much do we really owe? It's not as much as you think. It's not the 38 trillion that they're saying. I'll get to that at the very end. Thomas Anthony says, shutdown is the wrong word. It's a taxpayer holiday. For the first time, the machine that burns your money is on pause. The real crisis is when it turns back on. Yeah, when the machine turns back on, it's going to be hard to pay our bills because, we want the government to pay their bills. And so, excuse me while I pay some bills of my own with this, sponsored message. Prior to President Trump's second term, we saw every mainstream corporation push woke politics. Politics most Americans object to. Bud Light, Target, Disney, Jaguar, and more are boycotted because of toxic messaging. But did you know your own retirement money is driving it? Your 401ks and IRAs are made of shares of publicly traded corporations. And those shares are controlled by big institutions like BlackRock. BlackRock says they're walking away from woke DEI policies, but other institutions are sticking with them. If you want your hard-earned money out of their control, consider rolling over to iTrust Capital. iTrust Capital runs retirement accounts in gold, silver, and cryptocurrency. Precious metals have been trusted for thousands of years, and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are decentralized. They're out of the control of any single person or organization. Take back your freedom by taking control of your money. Click on the link to get started. There you go. Take back your freedom by taking control of your money. You can follow the link to iTrust Capital or Noble Gold or Uphold, any place where you can put some of your money away into your retirement or into just any asset that's fungible. Gold is great. Silver is great. Bitcoin is controversial, but it's great too. So is Ether and XRP. A lot of cryptocurrencies are scams and rug pulls and just shit coins. But Bitcoin, Ether, and XRP have stood the test of time. So those are good assets. Those are good, ways to preserve your wealth against inflation, and also kind of as a escape pod to when this corrupt Babylonian system of an economy crumbles, and you'll have something to move into. So I'm not saying that's financial advice. That's just saying what I'm doing, but that's what I'm, if you want to, avail yourself of my affiliate links, please do so. That's your choice. But let's start with the government shutdown because that's on a lot of people's minds right now as of October 29th. And I was having lunch yesterday and I was watching Cecil Says on YouTube. He was streaming a whole lot of, he was reacting to a whole lot of TikToks where low-income or supposedly low-income people were reacting about the end of SNAP benefits on November 1st. Because SNAP, EBT, food stamps in the old days, that's going to be shut off. And they're not going to be able to buy food with that. And we're going to go over, that a little bit later. But that's really just one sign of all the waste and corruption being flushed down. It's going to take several flushes to get rid of all the corruption. And we have to find out what corruption there is before we can flush it. So let's start with the shutdown. This is a tweet from Douglas Mackey. He says, here's how the hustle works. Illegal aliens come in, drop an anchor baby, whole family gets SNAP, rent assistance, Medicaid, you name it. Parents work cash jobs, meaning they get paid in cash, not, direct deposit or electronically. Sell SNAP for cash, send money back home to build a retirement home. And He's responding to Oilfield Rand, who says, I want SNAP to shut down for a month just to observe how much foreign remittances plummet in that month. The leftists and the I hesitate to call them liberals, but the phony liberals, the leftists, are whining, oh, so many needy people are going to lose their food benefits. Well, how many of them are actual American citizens who are in this country lawfully, legally? That's what Oilfield Rand wants to find out. Cynical Publius says, remember, folks, he's talking about Obamacare here. The purpose of Obamacare was to deliberately destroy the best healthcare system in the world, so the Marxist thievery this goon is advocating for would become inevitable. Don't fall for it. And he's responding to Kyle Blomquist for U.S. Congress. As government remains shut down fighting over our broken healthcare system, deciding who does or doesn't deserve care. Remember, Medicare for all fixes this. So Medicare for all is, the slogan of the left and the Democrats saying, hey, everyone deserves healthcare. Well, if what you think you deserve requires the labor of another person, you don't really deserve it. You have to earn it, or you have to exchange for it. Isn't that, doesn't everyone want a living wage and a well-paying job? Well, part of that has been deteriorated by fiat currency, and we need to get back to sound money like either gold, silver, or in this modern age, Bitcoin. But let's continue. We read this one already by Wall Street Mav. Now, one of the big issues I'm seeing on Twitter right now, besides the government shutdown, is all of the phony MAGA infiltrators and traitors who are supposedly Republican and conservative, but they're stabbing the movement in the back. MAGA isn't just conservative; it's just good. It's just common sense. MAGA is real conservatives and real liberals solving real problems and exposing all the frauds. And we're finding out that Thomas Massey is one such fraud. He's a phony conservative. He's a rhino, just like probably 95% of Congress. But let's hear what Cernovich says about Thomas Massey. If Thomas Massey's efforts to block Trump's one big beautiful bill had succeeded, then Schumer and the Democrats would have all the leverage right now, and ICE wouldn't have an operating budget. Now, I understand. A lot of this goes back to the one big beautiful bill that was passed in July, on July 4th, in fact. It's just squeaked through, and there was a debate between Trump and Elon Musk over the one big beautiful bill, and I think I have some tweets about that, unless Twitter is going to glitch on me and hide them. But personally, I think that feud between Trump and Elon was an act to flush out more phonies and more backstabbers and more traitors in the movement. But that's just my suspicion. We'll have to wait and see. And that's the thing. The one big beautiful bill set the rules for spending going forward, and now the Democrats are whining and trying to tack on more, and Republicans are holding the line. And Republicans have a mandate to do that because Trump won the 2024 election decisively. Everyone knew it. Now, not every member of Congress won their elections fair and square, fortification, but getting Trump in was a good start. And Trump has the mandate from the entire United States. The president is the one position in government that the entire country votes on. Cardi Hughes is responding to Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary. Says, holy cow, major government layoffs and permanent cuts to Democrat projects are inevitable thanks to the Democrat shutdown, per Caroline Leavitt. Democrats have given this administration an unenviable choice. Democrats are going to regret shutting down the government. Now, there it is. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. We're going to go into it in detail, but what Caroline Leavitt said is just, exactly it. Now, why are the Democrats, why is Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in Congress forcing this? Well, because they need their illegals. Like I said, illegals are a cornerstone of election fortification. So we're going to continue with this shutdown playlist here. President Trump, this is on October 20th. President Trump has just received word that multiple Democrats are showing signs they will cave to the Republicans on the shutdown. Well, that was 9 days ago, so we'll have to wait and see. They've called what's called a Trump derangement problem. Have you heard about that problem? Okay, let's actually hear what Trump says. Pause. Okay. So that's another thing that's another way to put it in a nutshell. So let's continue. Rosie Memo says they're trying to trick citizens into thinking it's about them when really it's about illegals. And she's reacting to the House Democrats. House Democrats will convene to hear from experts and hardworking Americans about the Republican healthcare crisis. Members of Congress will share the stories of their constituents who are being crushed by higher costs and reduced access to healthcare. Well, healthcare is expensive because of all the bureaucracy. In the next, big section, we're gonna see how government interference is causing bloat in all sorts of industries, from retail to the beef industry and whatever. How much you want to bet government spending, government regulations has driven up the cost of healthcare? I don't have the graph up. You might have seen it. It's a graph of job growth in the healthcare industry since like 1980 something, starting around the early 90s, which is when Bill Clinton and Hillary came into the White House. The number of administrative jobs in healthcare exploded, while the growth in the number of doctors and nurses and technicians stayed steady. It's the bureaucratic bloat that's causing healthcare crisis, not regular real healthcare. And how much of that is probably because of insurance? Continuing. Coming back to Wall Street Nav, he says, if there's a government shutdown, Trump has ordered Russ Vought to permanently eliminate jobs when funding lapses. In past shutdowns, they get a vacation and back pay a few days later, called furlough. This time, employees will be fired, eliminating thousands of government union jobs. So, members of my family are always on my case to get a government job because they think, state government or local government, because they think the retirement plan is so great. But I've always maintained that a retirement plan based on taxation and coercion of regular people is immoral. So I haven't said that to them because they haven't indicated that they would listen, but I'm saying it now. I said that to all my Uber passengers too, and they think, yeah, they agree with me. Eric Doherty says, holy crap, Speaker Johnson reveals Democrat insiders are admitting they're privately terrified of getting political guillotine if they reopen the government under a simple, clean, continuing resolution. So he says, another insider said, we would have enough votes to reopen the government if people were not terrified of getting the guillotine. Okay, they mean it metaphorically, but in a political sense, that's exactly what they're concerned about. This is hostage taking. The American people would have an open government if Democrats were not terrified of their radical base. So is it really the base they're worried about, or is it the Democrat leadership or the deep state players who have blackmail on them? Oh, yeah, I said blackmail. I mean, what do you think Epstein was about? Lisa May, and I'm going to expand this. Then we're going to listen to the clip. Lisa May says Marshall Blackburn is hearing Senator Chuck Schumer has had a war room set up for at least 3 months with everything they want to accomplish during the shutdown. They are hearing Dems want to keep the government shut down until at least October 18th, the No Kings rally, which has come and gone and was a fart in the wind, to take place in D.C. She said Schumer doesn't want AOC to out-left him. It's all a game to them. Disgusting. So let's... You know, after 2020, I'm not sure why any politician is worried about, getting voted out, unless you're Donald Trump and you've got a lot of intelligence and military backing on your side. And I do mean intelligence because that's a big part of it. But moving on, this one's from October 1st, so it's been a while. Caroline Levitt confirms several mass federal layoffs are imminent thanks to the Schumer shutdown. Tens of thousands of bureaucrats are facing termination, all because they want money for illegals. Oh no! Don't throw me in the briar patch, Rare Bear. Okay. Scott Adams of Dilbert fame says Trump already won the government shutdown battle, at least with the public. Now Democrats need some face-saving way to back down and reopen. But Trump probably doesn't care either way. Democrats need a fake because to reopen government, because they can now claim reopening was the only way Democrats can stop Trump from stealing your democracy. He said this on October 21st, so this was after the No Kings rally. They're on a cover stories. Thanks to a free speech platform liberated by Elon Musk, and thanks to Rumble, and thanks to Truth Social, it's a lot easier to unmask DC's true intentions, the Democrats' true intentions. And right now, I'm seeing a lot of supposed anti-Semitism on Twitter by a lot of so-called conservatives. We're unmasking the fake conservatives too. We're unmasking Tucker Carlson. We're unmasking Marjorie Taylor Greene. We're unmasking people who, well, they are gleefully trying to prove every accusation of the Democrats true of what conservatives are. They're gleefully, trying to oblige them. So I'm not falling for it. I was distressed about it during most of the year when this was ramping up, but it's obvious now it's the horseshoe. Left, right, are really just going to meet in the middle. So, moving on, Cynical Publius says, one of the biggest problems Donald Trump faces is institutional resistance from unelected bureaucrats in the federal administrative state, including the military. Anyone who has achieved success in a specific system is almost always resistant to change to that system. Yeah, a lot of pushback towards making America great again and cleaning up corruption, cleaning up economy, making things better for workers, for the working class, for American citizens, stopping crime, is all in the administrative state, in the bureaucracy. So Cynical Publius says, anyone who's achieved success in a specific system is almost always resistant to change to that system, no matter how necessary that change may be. This is true everywhere, not just the military and or government. But at least in the private sector, profit and loss always ultimately forces change against organizational resistance, or you go out of business. Trump does not have that advantage, so he has to defeat the deep state by sheer force of will. Trump was never a politician before he was president. He was a very successful businessman. So he understands business. He understands getting results. And he understands delivering results. And it's got to be frustrating, but it's also got to be, kind of an enticing challenge. Trump was made for this. He's dealt with all sorts. When you're in real estate, you have to deal with, city government for zoning and all that. You have to deal with the banks. You have to deal with, and if you're a really successful big-time business person, you have to deal with spies, corporate spies from your competitors. So he knows how to hire and employ intelligence agents. So he knows how to pick who to trust. He knew right away not to trust the CIA or the CIA or the FBI, and he got a lot of flack for that. But he's turned out to be right. So. Again, putting the government shutdown in a nutshell is Mike Johnson. He says in this tweet, here's the simple reason the government is shut down. One, House Republicans passed a clean continuing resolution over 2 weeks ago. This was back in September, to keep the government open and continue our work for the American people. Two, the Senate Democrats blocked it to give illegal aliens free health care and protect themselves from their radical base. That's it. So we're not going to play this video because we got to move on. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and I still stand with Pam Bondi, by the way, even though it's taking a while to get, the Epstein. Do you understand how vast the criminal network is? How vast the corruption is? Do you understand the job that faces Trump and his team, including Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Scott Bessent? And I'm starting to have a little doubts about Vice President Vance because of his connection to Tucker Carlson, but Trump's team, that team of Patriots, do you understand the corruption they face? Do you understand the massive Gordian knot they have to untie? I'm willing to give them some slack because you have to be watching just how much how much poison and rot there is in order to appreciate what they're doing. And if you don't see that, if you're like really super, super impatient about it, I mean, you're not paying attention. Well, let's see what Pam Bondi has to say. Oh, shit, this is referring to Karen Bass in Los Angeles. Shutdown Democrats are already refusing to pay our law enforcement agents. Now, Representative Robert Garcia and Senator Blumenthal are trying to put ICE agents at risk for doing their job. So yeah, they don't want. Another part of this is, they're willing to sacrifice, bureaucrats in the administrative government. They want to cut off the pay of ICE agents Border Patrol, the military, law enforcement. So it's all a part of protecting the illegals. Justice Department has zero tolerance for violence against law enforcement. We'll prosecute any person who physically assaults our agents. So, and this video is 25 minutes long. We're not going to watch it because it's probably cringe. Dominion voting. This is DC Drano. Not sure why I put this in the shutdown folder, but I think it's pertinent to what we're going to go over later. My hot take on the Dominion sale, and that's Dominion voting systems. It just got bought by Republicans. My hot take on the Dominion sale is that embedded deep state operatives cleaned out all the evidence and abandoned ship once Trump won last November. Then they allowed Dominion to be sold for pennies on the dollar because the jig was up after they were exposed in 2020. Absolutely crazy that we had a foreign-owned election machine company running our election. Because Dominion, I think the parent company is in Venezuela. And we're all finding out how crooked Venezuela is. I mean, we thought it was bad, but it's a narco state. It's a terrorist state. Absolutely crazy that we had a foreign-owned election machine company running our election. Watch how much big the margins Republicans win by in 2026. And he's responding to Rasmussen reports. Dominion sold for scrap because indictments expected soon. You bet your bippy that we're reading between the lines here. But with what is surfacing almost daily, it's practically the only reason that makes sense. Scott Leyendecker gives a call if we're way wrong. So Scott Leyendecker, it must be this guy. But now why do I have an election issue post in this economic program? I'm gonna get to that at the very end. Wall Street Apes is responding to a video. It says more Americans are exposing the truth about the SNAP EBT program. And it's quoted this video. So we're going to listen to this video. How do you sell food stamps? I don't know because I'm not a crook, but they're exchanging the food stamps for cash. Why not just give them cash? Why not just give them money? So, but did he say, what did he say? $4,000, $2,000 in food stamps every month? I mean, that's a living wage. That's a living income in most parts of the country. Outside the big cities where, housing is so super expensive, $4,000 a month is a comfortable income. If you're a single adult, I don't know if it's enough to raise a family on, but shit. Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, contracts update. This is from October 18th, so this is pertinent to the shutdown. Over the past 4 days, agencies terminated 150 wasteful contracts with a ceiling value of $3.2 billion and savings of $240 million, including 67,000 a U.S. AGM makeup artist contract, a $107,000 Department of War Services contract for a group fitness instructor, a $5.2 million Health and Human Services contract for professional support services in South Africa. Why is the Health and Super Services? Why is that in South Africa? And a $276,000 U.S. AGM broadcasting contract for the American radio program. So, all right. If you were following the USA drama earlier this year, a lot of these government programs are just money laundering. Now, Hakeem Jeffries. Let's see what So Eric Doherty says, wow, Hakeem Jeffries is now losing it upon being challenged for withholding pay from the American troops by his own party, keeping the government shut down. So this is going to be cringe, but I think we're going to grit our teeth and listen to this. This is textbook cluster B behavior. Blatantly lying about something that everyone else, that the abuse victim knows is true. He says he wants to support health care for the American people when we know it's about illegals. And he thinks if he said it with enough certitude, with enough certainty, we're just going to cave. We're on to you. Okay, Oilfield Randall, we read that one. I think we covered this already. This is just a double post. Okay, so Doge AI. So Doge AI says Democrats claim they're clarifying healthcare eligibility while troops miss paychecks. Classic gaslighting. Schumer's shutdown gambit is about forcing through expanded benefits for illegal immigrants disguised as healthcare fixes. Every day this drags on, Americans see clearer. Democrats prioritize open border handouts over military families. And open borders is the reason why Zoran Mamdani is likely to win the mayor's race in New York City. You know, besides fortification, besides him dominating the news cycle with his outrageous, beyond the pale antics and sucking up all the attention, it's because a lot of foreigners are voting in New York City when maybe they should, even some that shouldn't be because they're here illegally. But I mean, that's the party of Tammany Hall for you. Continuing, the White House is right. This shutdown isn't fiscal prudence. It's a deliberate squeeze to normalize taxpayer-funded health care for illegals. Republicans must hold the line. No more DC word games. Secure the border, pay our troops, and end the grift. The real story behind the shutdown's winners and losers is laid bare here, and it gives a longer article, but we're going to keep going. Okay, Truth Hammer Forever posted this on July 5th. I included this here, but just can't give you a taste of what's going on. What is odious debt? Be a darn shame if everyone learned what this means and told the Fed to take a hike, because who do we owe the national debt to? It's not just foreign countries, it's the central banks. We owe money from the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve is the main head bank of the United States. Odious debt refers to debt incurred by a government or regime that is considered illegitimate or not in the best interest of the nation's people, often because it was contracted under oppressive, corrupt, or non-democratic conditions. The concept suggests that such debts should not be enforceable against the population, especially after a regime change, as they are not used for the public's benefit. Key characteristics of odious debt include lack of consent. The debt was incurred without the consent of the people, typically under a dictatorship or authoritarian regime, and no benefit to the public. The borrowed funds were used for purposes that did not serve the population, such as personal enrichment of leaders or suppression of citizens. So, do we have a mechanism for dealing with odious debt? We sure do, and I'll get to that at the end. Stick with me here. Oh, this is choice. Next order, saying on October 14th, breaking. U.S. troops have now received their pay this week. A War Department official confirms to me. Trump and Hegseth followed through. This is despite Chuck Schumer's efforts to block our heroes from being paid. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, service members who received their minimum salary and their leave from earning statements are now available in my pay, the official says. Now, how did this happen? Well, because Trump's getting a whole bunch of money from tariffs. I think I have the tweet pulled up, or the post pulled up, but Trump said, hey, we can go around the system here. I can pay the military the troops directly through tariffs. How much you want to bet he can pay ICE for that? You know what that means? That's a very good sign that the Babylonian debt system that we're under is cracking. The tides have turned. So Caroline Love, here's something unfortunate. Caroline Love says on October 10th, wow, Democrats are now saying that unless planes are falling out of the sky because of air traffic controllers staffing shortages, they will not end their government shutdown. One of the most disgusting statements I've ever read. Yep. This is a video from July 5th. Wall Street Ape says, I can't believe this is real, but it is. The American woman who danced at the checkout after spending $3,000 at Walmart on EBT food stamps has more videos. She does this every month. The whole family gets involved, dancing, celebrating free taxpayers-funded food. Again, this is a separate shopping trip from the last video I shared. She has tons of these videos. Yeah. Is this TikTok? Yeah, it's TikTok. Yeah, that's cringe. But we've got people bragging about taking advantage of taxpayers. I don't want to think it's a racial thing, but maybe it's more of a conditional. Maybe it's more of a. After this, I want to go back to my video about trauma and abuse. A lot of trauma abuse can be passed down by generations. It's like it's the study of epigenetics. You know, a lot of phony conservatives saying that corruption is genetically passed down by race. How much you want to bet it's conditioning, epigenetic, brought on by stress, cortisol, all sorts of things. And these people are like, don't see any other way to make an honest living. Now, Lisa Main, responding to John Solomon on October 15th, says, looks like they're going to push the shutdown to last at least 61 days. Congressional Democrats consider adding reversal of Trump admin firings to the list of shutdown demands. So I keep hearing that 61 days, 61 is the magic number, because then a lot of these layoffs can become permanent. I don't know if that kind of conflicts with what I heard earlier, but Caroline Leavitt says this is, unfortunate that the Democrats are forcing the government shutdown, but the more this drags on, the more people realize, hey, the more regular people say, hey, let's have government shutdown more often. Let's have the mainstream media just shut up and be discredited, because this is great. A whole lot of things get flushed out and burned down. Yep. Eric Doherty, back to the topic of troops. Panic is ensuing among Democrats after learning that President Trump is paying the troops, keeping food programs alive for women and children, and cutting thousands of federal employees as a result of their shutdown. Chuck Schumer walked into a political landmine. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Trump is funding WIC. That's kind of a separate program from EBT and SNAP, but WIC is specifically for women and children, and that's going thanks to President Trump's maneuvering. This tweet from July 1st, Senator Eric Schmidt, the big beautiful bill kicks 1.4 million illegal immigrants off Medicaid. For too long, Americans have been paying for the welfare of people who shouldn't even be in our country. Today, the Senate voted to end that. And yes, this did make it into the final draft of the bill. So, the American people voted for this. The Senate voted for it. The people want this. The people don't want to pay for illegal aliens. Because if you consider that EBT is being traded for cash, how much you want to bet that healthcare benefits are being traded for cash? I don't know how, but we're going to find that out probably. Go to some corner store, go to some maybe payday cash loan, thing or whatever, do it under the table, and voila. Jack, aka Jack Unheard, on October 18th says, President Trump just dropped pure nightmare fuel for Chuck Schumer and the entire left. They really messed up. Let's listen to this. This is just 45 seconds long. Government programs are the deep state's trough. Their meal ticket, their bread and butter. Government programs get a whole bunch of government money, goes to the NGOs, goes to the supposed nonprofits, goes to so-called grants, whatever, and a lot of that gets funneled away into political donations for the politicians, mainly Democrats, but probably Republicans too. The phony Republicans, the phony conservatives, and that's what keeps the corruption going, because taxpayer money, debt from the Federal Reserve, it's funding all the corruption. Now, what's interesting is Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate are weighing that against the illegal aliens. What's more important to them, the money or the aliens? Like I said, aliens are part of their election fortification, apparatus. So they probably think they cannot function without fortified elections. They think that's more pressing than money for the grift, for keeping the machine going. So either they think they have enough to keep the machine going for a while, or they just think fortification is that important. So that's telling us a lot about them. Russ Vaught, I think we already covered him. Ooh, Joe Lang. He's got a long text tweet here, but we need to read this because Joe Lang always puts out good stuff. I think he's one of the good guys. Joe Lang says, would you like to see leverage applied to the Democrats over the federal government shutdown? The SNAP program is about to take center stage. This is October 27th, so this is 2 days ago. The White House is warning 42 million low-income Americans will start, well, I don't know if they're really low income. We're going to cover that later. White House is warning 42 million low-income Americans will start to miss SNAP benefits Saturday if Democrats don't vote for a funding stopgap this week. Speaker Mike Johnson is siding with the Trump administration's decision not to tap emergency funds to avert a lapse in food aid for 42 million Americans. Joe says, I believe one of two things will happen. Either the Democrats will cave and vote for the clean CR to avoid getting the blame, or Trump will use money from another program that is a slush fund for subsidizing the blue states. The Democrat states have been laundering federal taxpayer dollars to subsidize their government unions for a long time. My wish is that Trump wouldn't just take money from one program and add it to the SNAP program. I hope, Trump had said, makes these recipients of SNAP apply for it again through a different fund in order to eliminate fraud. Bring on Doge. Democrats don't care that a lot of people aren't going to get their SNAP benefits. They want all those people to be angry and are hoping to turn that anger against Trump. But nothing ever works out the way they planned. And speaking of the SNAP program, did you know that I dove into that program in order to connect some very important dots in one of my Substack articles from the past? What does the SNAP program have to do with Nancy Pelosi, North Korea, and Armenia. If you think the SNAP program is corrupt, it's not just the tip of the iceberg. And he has a link to a Substack article, which I'll have to read another time, maybe when I'm not recording, because I'm 50 minutes into this. We've got so much to cover, so this is going to be a long program. But yeah, how much you want to bet they want the SNAP beneficiaries to riot? Like this is going to be another event like the No Kings rally. My suspicion is about No Kings. They wanted a George Floyd sequel. You know, the George Floyd protests turned into George Floyd riots because they had Antifa and Black Lives Matter rioters hiding among the protesters. They used the George Floyd protests as a Trojan horse for their rioters, and they're Gestapo, they're SS. So they're goon squad to inflict terror on the American people. How much you want to bet this SNAP program is going to be another cover story? I've seen so many memes about Walmart, Target, grocery store, Costco employees preparing for actual battle against orcs, gorillas, whatever, what have you, about people getting violent. Now, hopefully that's contained in the blue cities, not in my state, but I would at least carry pepper spray when you go to the store, wherever you are. Roosevelt again. Eric Doherty says, breaking, a huge fuck around, find out moment. The OMB director, Roosevelt, just halted $11 billion in projects to the blue cities of New York City, Chuck and Hakeem's home turf, San Francisco, Boston, and Baltimore. Shutting the government down was a huge screw-up. Vaught says, the Democrat shutdown has drained the Army Corps of Engineers' ability to manage billions of dollars in projects. The Corps will be immediately pausing over $1 billion in lower priority projects and considering them for cancellation. So, what was the Army Corps of Engineers doing in these cities? Don't these cities have their own crews to build projects? One thing here in my town, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, they're building a casino. Certain people want a casino in Cedar Rapids for decades, and it finally got approved by the state board. Why? Well, some people are thinking, it's because Doge has cut off a bunch of federal money to the city government, and the city government needs a new way to bring money in. It's going to be painful. We're going to see a lot of shenanigans going on, but at least now it's going to be out in the open. And the more information the regular people have, the more they'll be able to combat it. I mean, it's frustrating to not think that there's so much going on and we can't do anything about it. The best thing you do is talk to each other, be calm, be reasonable, and learn. I mean, no one has the whole solution, but everyone has part of the solution. So talk to each other and collaborate. Share information. Gunther Eagleman says, say goodbye to all these bureaucrats that Chuck Schumer allowed to be fired. Thank you, Chuck. So he's responding to Sophia Kai. The Trump admin, in a court filing, says 7 agencies began RIFs today. Commerce, 315 employees. Education, 466 employees. A lot of people are mad at the Department of Education. Energy, 187 employees. I think that's going to be important later on when we talk about the economy, AI, nuclear power. HHS, 1,100 to 1,200 employees. HUD, 442 employees. DHS, 176 employees. Treasury, 1,446 employees. So that's important. Think of how much red tape is disappearing. Think of how much, think of how much freedom regular small businesses and startups are going to get. Willfield Rando, again, says, guess what would happen to grocery prices if SNAP had disappeared permanently? I'm betting grocery prices would go down. You know why healthcare is expensive besides, the bureaucracy? Is because a lot of money comes from the government. You want to know why college education is so expensive in this country? Why students and young people are enslaved by such massive debt, it's because the government took over the student loan industry. These, the organizations that get government money think, oh, wow, we can charge whatever we want. And it makes it harder for regular folks. So, yeah. I wonder if there's a lot less money that should be in circulation than there is right now. Oh, this is good. Lionel Rose says on October 13th, amazing news. The Trump administration has shut down the Office of Population Affairs, the agency heavily responsible for funding Planned Parenthood and pushing sexually deviant propaganda on kids. So there was a government office actually giving taxpayer money to Planned Parenthood, the abortion giant. Okay, yeah. I don't know why I forgot about that, because that's significant. Joe Lang again, another long text here, but Joe Lang's posts are always worth a thorough read. This is a really good point by Byron Donalds. Democrats aren't just fighting for healthcare for illegals. Obamacare was a massive money laundering operation for Democrats. It's far worse than you can imagine. The Justice Department has charged a Pakistani national who allegedly orchestrated a $650 million fraud scheme that primarily targeted an Arizona Medicaid program offering addiction treatment and other services for Native Americans. Court papers say the defendant, Farouk Ali, conspired with at least 41 addiction clinics to bill the state for hundreds of millions of dollars for addiction services that were never provided, not provided as billed, or medically unnecessary. Many of the patients who were enrolled, but not given legitimate treatment, were recruited from the homeless population or Native American reservations, officials say. The Ali indictment is one of nearly 200 federal cases that the department announced Monday as part of its 2025 National Healthcare Fraud Takedown. The effort is part of the department's long-running campaign to combat fraud in the healthcare sector, which officials estimate at around $300 billion per year. That's linked sources NPR.org. A Pakistani national was stealing $650 million from taxpayers through Medicaid fraud. Just a coincidence that Obama has a lot of connections to Pakistan? And the estimated amount of healthcare fraud is around $300 billion a year. That's a lot of taxpayer money to fund our enemies. Want to see a bigger connection to Obama? Here's a really important Q drop. Q drop 466 from January 5th, 2018. Watch the scene traveling the globe. Money, money, money. Account number, this looks like X6 39670. Account number such and such 2391. Where did the money come from? How do you destroy the most powerful country in the world? Direct attack, covert op by class, 59 hashtag 241-Q to infiltrate at highest levels to destroy from within. Think game. Who are the players? What are the rewards? America for sale. Patriots in full control. We'll make more public. Saudi Arabia was strategic. We know. Do as we say or face consequences. These people are stupid. So much info on this Q drop. People can criticize Q because they say, oh, trust the plan. Well, the plan isn't just simply White House cleaning house. The plan is arming the public with information. The plan is the Great Awakening. And we saw that during the Biden occupation. The Q drops were just preparing people. I didn't follow the Q drops originally because I'm not on 4chan, but I followed a lot of great content creators who did follow Q, and I'm really impressed. X-22 Report is chief among them, but there's also Joe Lang and a lot of other anons who post on Twitter. Contact lens is popping out. Okay, so much info in this Q drop. Did you catch the two bank account numbers? Guess who one of those bank account accounts was connected to? Here's that same Q drop included in another drop that connects that bank account to someone who was indicted for healthcare fraud. El Amir Mehta indictment. PDF Department of Justice, a Pakistani Department of Justice, PDF files, April 10th, 2014, had access to a checking account in the name of one of his sons, son number one, such and such, 2391, at a Bank of America branch in New Jersey. Pretty sure we found our Hezbollah connection. Hezbollah. You have more than you know. This is why we are here. Great job, Patriot. Watch the speech. We are talking to you. Proofs only meant for you. Q. So who is El Amir Medat? In 2015, Dr. El Amir was charged with multiple tax violations, including tax evasion and failure to file tax returns related to his medical practice. He was accused of depositing over $5.8 million in cash from insurance reimbursements into personal bank accounts without reporting the income, transferring his home to a family member to avoid IRS claims, and filing a false 2008 tax return. He pleaded guilty on 2 counts, corruptly endeavoring to impede the Internal Revenue Code and tax evasion. But later, just before sentencing in 2016, he requested to revoke his guilty plea, claiming that he was innocent and had been pressured by his attorney. He was accused of tax fraud and had deposited $5.8 million into personal bank accounts from fraudulent health insurance and reimbursements. Q told us that Obama was withdrawing money from one of those accounts. Guess what happened to El Amir Medat? He died mysteriously. Dr. Medat El Amir passed away on February 15th, 2017, following a cardiac arrest while traveling to his office in an Uber. He was born in Cairo, Egypt, and held Egyptian citizenship. Muslim Brotherhood? Good bet. Just a coincidence? So, let's see here. That's big. So, apparently, SNAP, EBT, and all the other government programs are not as a money laundering operation, are not worth as much to the Democrats as Obamacare is. That's why Obamacare was such a big. That's why the Affordable Care Act was such a big centerpiece of Obama's so-called presidency. It makes sense now. I'm just going to see how much more there is. Yeah, we're going to keep going. Bad Omri says, by the way, the most recent data shows that about 3.9 million anchor babies are qualifying for their illegal alien parents' households for SNAP. Additionally, there are 1.5 million refugees on SNAP. Yep, that tracks. Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Reports, and Rasmussen is the only polling, is the only polling agency that I trust right now. He says, "Whoa, so much for Trump getting blamed for the shutdown." So if you can't see on your screen, a lot of lines falling down the graph, and apparently it's. I'm trying to read. Net approval comparison. I'm not getting. The blue line is supposed to be. No, the dark red line is supposed to be Trump. The purple line is Obama. First term. The dark purple line is Obama's second term. The red line is Trump's first term. Okay. This is a graph of approval ratings over, different periods of time during different presidential terms. And I can just barely see Trump second term. Oh yeah, the red one. This bright red line is Trump's approval rating. It is steady, while all the other lines have gone down. So Trump is not being blamed for the shutdown. I think Trump earned a lot of. Well, I think he always had people's, approval. It was just hidden by the mainstream media. So job number one for Trump was discrediting the media. That's how he won me over. Like, I've hated the media for many years, since really the Iraq War. When Trump called them out to their faces in July of 2016, that's when he won me over. I didn't like Trump at first because I didn't think he was a real conservative. Now I'm finding out, yeah, he was, and all the other Republicans are phony. So there you go. Like I said, Trump knows the spy game very well, and he knows what's what. Now, Data Republican, she always has good stuff. We're not going to read the whole spreadsheet here, but she says, just created the spreadsheet, and you can see some very familiar names. I'm creating a thread on the founders of Indivisible shortly. So, what did she say? Did she say anything about? Yeah, she talked about Indivisible a few posts down. So, let's read this. Meet the organizers behind the No Kings protest. Indivisible's Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin. Taking a break from a book writing for this. Just a second. Excuse me. Taking a break from book writing for this. This week, the movement that started with a Google Doc, Indivisible, is back in the streets. Founded by former congressional staffers Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin, and funded by George Soros' Open Society Network, Indivisible has grown from a viral guide to one of the most powerful grassroots networks in the U.S. Are they really grassroots if they're funded by Soros? Now they're leading No Kings, a nationwide push to remind America that democracy means no one is above the law. This thread dives into who Greenberg and Levin are, how Indivisible rose to prominence, and what's really behind the No Kings movement. As always, patience as I pull the thread together in real time. And I don't know if I have time to read the whole thing, but my theory stands that they want a George Floyd riot for No Kings, a George Floyd style riot in No Kings, but they couldn't pull it off because Antifa could not blend in with white boomers. Now, you've heard about the Ottoman scandal, right? How President Biden was not really signing documents. It was all the Ottoman. Awakened Outlaw is responding to Ed Martin. He says, holy crap, I have to wonder what all this ultimately results in happening if everything important signed by Ottoman is determined to be null and void. And is that even possible? How would this work, Ed? So I think we're going to get to that later. I can't keep track of all the posts I bookmarked. Maybe I bookmarked too many, but we're going to skip that. Yeah, we're gonna cover this here. This is by Elon Musk. He says, given the census counts all persons, not just citizens, for purposes of determining the number of House seats and the disproportionate number of non-citizens in New England, there are technically a negative number of Republicans elected, as seats were taken from red parts of the country. So, yeah, illegal immigration doesn't just affect voter fortification. It affects the number of seats in Congress that a district has. So, if we could deport a whole lot of illegals, think how many representatives of Congress, California would lose, how much Boston and Vermont would lose, and the coast. So, you can see from the map. Maine is mostly red, but how many people in Maine live in the red areas? How many people should not live in the blue areas? That's important. Another contracts update by Department of Government Efficiency. They have terminated descope 97 wasteful contracts with a ceiling value of $2.3 billion and savings of $160 million, including, we'll just skip that here. Another long Joe Lang post. I'm not sure we're going to read this one, but it's about the two grandstanding rhinos from Kentucky, Thomas Massey and Rand Paul. We'll just read the first few paragraphs. For those who have followed me for a while, I can't stand the two grandstanding rhinos from Kentucky. Not only do both of them vote with the Democrats to stab Trump in the back, they also paint themselves as the protectors of the Constitution and the American people. Nothing could be further from the truth. They both voted with the Democrats against the One Big Beautiful Bill, which would have massively raised taxes on the American people. They also complain about stuff in order to raise money for themselves while never actually doing anything about it. Here's a perfect example. Just over a week ago, Thomas Massey was posting how the great thing about the government being shut down was that the chemtrails have stopped. I asked him, why has he done a thing to stop them in all the years that he's been in Congress? He's all talk and has never done anything. And as I mowed my grass today, guess what? A whole bunch of chemtrails in the sky over Kentucky. He's got photos here. He's a member of Congress from Kentucky. He says he's against it. So why hasn't he stopped it? The truth is, everything Massey does is about one thing, raising money for himself. Trump is exactly right. He's nothing but a grandstander. So I used to like Thomas Massey, but now the mask is off. So just think how many people I like now are frauds. I've shared videos from Ian Carroll. He turned out to be a glowy. I've been a big fan of Black Insurrectionists on Twitter. He turned out to be a fraud. I'll never meet your heroes. The Republican posting a graphic about all the sponsored partners of the No Kings protest, a whole lot of leftist organizations. This is important. Eric Doherty says, the country's largest federal workers union just demanded Chuck Schumer and Democrats reopen the government by passing the Republican Clean CR. They represent nearly 1 million workers. The American Federation of Government Employees president, it's time to pass a clean continuing resolution and end the shutdown today. No half measures, no gamesmanship. Devastating way for Chuck Schumer to staff this week. Wicked Outlaw, responding to this video of Mike Johnson, says, by taking this ridiculous stance, what if the Democrats are legit low-key broadcasting the very programs that launder money back themselves? I personally suspect this has long been the game and why they've been so intent on funding this crazy shit. So let's listen. You know, the phony conservatives, the alt-right or woke right on Twitter are really upset about giving money to Israel, and I very seldom see them bitch about all this money from other countries. At least Israel does stuff for us. I asked Grok a few months ago, what has Israel ever offered or has ever assisted the America's military or offered us assist the American military? And they sure have. They mostly do stuff with intelligence, but they also offer like logistics help for our military in the Middle East. And yeah, Israel pulls its weight. But I think Wicked Outlaw's point is here, hey, they're telling us what their money laundering schemes are. Write this down. I'm just seeing which one I want to read because we're winding down on this section of the video. Yeah, we're going to read this long post by Cynical Publius because I think this is important. And Cynical Publius is like Joe Lang. He always has good stuff. The main lesson Patriots should be taken away from the government shutdown is just how much money is forcibly taken from hardworking citizen taxpayers and redistributed, Karl Marx style, to the half of Americans that pay no federal income tax whatsoever. Do you pay taxes? If so, that is your money Democrat politicians are screeching about when they hyperbolically moan about the government shutdown, making people that not have free health care or free food or free child care or free Section 8 housing subsidies. So I'm all for government helping people who are generally unable to help themselves, mainly disabled people. I'm starting to think disabled people are the only people who really need help. Either that, them and maybe abuse victims or the victims of crime. But something is terribly, terribly wrong when one half of the nation is responsible for supporting the basic needs of the other half. Worse, this is how Democrats maintain power, i.e. free stuff in exchange for votes. But here's the even crazier thing. It's the Democrats who have shut down the government and cut off the flow of free stuff to their most important constituents. It makes no sense, right? But it does make sense, and I'll tell you why. Even with all the free stuff, Democrats are losing voters. The 2024 election showed this. Record numbers of blacks, Latinos, young males, and other traditionally Democrat voters switched sides. So the Democrats' solution to get more new voters dependent on free stuff is to get more new voters dependent on free stuff, i.e. illegal alien voters. That's why they're willing to shut down the government and screw over their traditional base. It's more important that they get free medical care and other free stuff for illegal aliens so they stay in power. Democrats' rhetoric makes all of this non-obvious, and there are more unspoken steps to process like amnesty for illegals. But I assure you, what I say is the gospel truth. So, case in point, Zoran Mamdani in New York City. He's running away with the election. He shouldn't be, because he's openly communist. He says the most outrageous, psychopathic, supposed to be shit. He's a pathological liar, and he's going to be the mayor of New York City. I wish more attention was paid to Curtis Sliwa, because he's a real, true New Yorker who actually fights crime. He started an organization called Guardian Angels to do just that. But how many people in New York City are foreigners and illegal aliens to boot? How many of these illegal aliens? Because if you're an illegal alien, you're not really an immigrant. You're not really a sojourner. You're an invader. How many of these people are invaders who want to upend and overthrow the lawful government of New York City? Now, extrapolate that. That's job number one of Biden's open borders policy. When you really think about it. We've covered this. For Obamacare stuff. This is from Mike Johnson. This is from Mike Johnson. He's responding to Elizabeth Warren. He says, here's some simple facts. Obamacare was created and passed entirely by Democrats. Since Obamacare took effect, health insurance premiums have skyrocketed because of bureaucracy, I'm sure. Obamacare COVID-era subsidies were also passed entirely by Democrats and set to expire at the end of this year. Democrats have increased healthcare costs exponentially and are now shutting down the government as they try to cover up their own failures and somehow blame Republicans. It's time for Democrats to reopen the government so we can fix this mess. So that's another thing. Healthcare enrollment is next month. I think, it starts, I think it's between November 1st and the 15th. So if you're self-employed, either go on the healthcare.gov website or find some alternative plan. Maybe that's what I promote. Healthcare for alternative healthcare coverage. Maybe that'll be my next affiliate program. Okay, this is important here. Back to Obamacare. Government-funded healthcare has tripled while out-of-pocket costs remain the same or went up. It's note the highest single item expense for the federal government, and Democrats want to add another $1 trillion. So it's a graph of, and I have to squint to read this on the computer screen. The biggest section in yellow in this pie chart is non-section specific health. Okay, so health is the second biggest section of the chart here. No specific, sector specific. How much you want to bet that's all the miscellaneous stuff that Mike Johnson was talking about earlier? All the programs and grants. I think this is important. Ryan Speeder says, highlights from a new Harvard Caps Harris poll. Americans overwhelmingly support nearly all of Trump's administration's major initiatives that are listed below. I'm not going to read them all, but think about this. All the polling places are biased towards Democrats, other than Rasmussen. If any polling firm besides Rasmussen is saying that Americans overwhelmingly support Trump on his major initiatives, that seals it. Americans really are with him because they can't. It's the number's probably so big they can't hide it through funny word questions. So with that, we've cleared that section. I think it's time to take another break. So let's talk about another sponsor and a way to support the program. You've probably seen Black Rifle coffee at Walmart or in the cold brew section of the convenience store or any other corporate retail chain. Black Rifle purports to be a patriotic company supporting the Second Amendment, but they turned their backs on Kyle Rittenhouse. Phonies. Who can we trust not to sell out? If you want to support a genuine American coffee company that values your right to self-defense, choose Blackout Coffee. Not Black Rifle, Blackout. Blackout Coffee is endorsed by the Second Amendment Foundation. Their products are available online, like any self-respecting 21st century startup, and they just taste better. I know from experience. I treat myself to Blackout Coffee, and you can treat yourself by clicking on the link in my program. Again, that's Blackout Coffee, not Black Rifle. Use my link or my promo code for 10% off your purchase. Blackout Coffee. I wear their hats to hide my bedhead. All right. Now we got to talk about the larger economy, and we're about halfway through this. These next 2 sections are a lot shorter. I didn't realize I had so many posts bookmarked on the shutdown folder, but we got to talk about. We're going to start with AI. We're going to start with the AWS outage that happened a week and a half ago on October 20th, because I think it's definitely tied to the deep state, plan to counter President Trump's cleaning of the government here, because a lot of corporations, not just healthcare, not just Planned Parenthood, a lot of corporations are tied to the hip to the government, and they benefit a lot from government corruption. But we're going to start the section with a quote from Grums. Grums is big in the gaming kind of conversation. He's former director of gaming at Blizzard. He was instrumental in making World of Warcraft, and he's been a big advocate of cleaning up the politics and wokeness in games. But here he talks about AI, and he says, "People know I'm an AI advocate, but only because I'm an acceleration to in this matter. I wish AI had never been invented, but now that it's here, we have to prove it can either work or not work and do it quickly. There is a chance AI will work, and if it does, usher in either extinction or incomprehensible prosperity. What I fear is a long, drawn-out phase where AI starts replacing jobs at scale, but never quite gets smart enough to get us to a post-scarcity or takes too long to do it. In that case, the amount of pain and suffering for humanity will be immense." So everyone's worried about losing their jobs. I mean, I'm not worried about government employees losing their jobs because those aren't real jobs. I mean, say what you will about the boomers. There's so much waste in government. And the government confiscates money from the citizens forcibly to pay for government workers. The government should be as small as possible. I mean, taxation is theft. I mean, start getting comfortable saying that. I've covered before, property tax is illegal. I read a whole article via Zero Hedge explaining that. The legal case for abolishing property tax. So a lot of tax shouldn't even be. The only tax I really am on board with is a consumption tax. It's like a sales tax, because then you can actually choose on what you spend money on and how much you actually spend. Income tax is inherently unfair because there's multiple ways to make an income, either through a job or through a business or through, self-employment or through donations, what have you. I'm fine with government employees losing their jobs. I'm not fine with private sector workers losing their jobs, unless they can figure out a way to start their own business and become independent from their corporate overlords. Did you know Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, his grandfather was one of the co-founders of DARPA? He has connections to government. So how much you want to bet Mark Zuckerberg has it in with the government? We've covered before that Jack Dorsey. We've covered before that Twitter was definitely, an intelligence op before Elon took it over. Elon, for what it's worth, was at least honest about his government assistance. He got so much free money from the government, but he was upfront about it. But really the way to succeed in the world right now is through government favoritism and through special favors from the government. And we got to expose that and eliminate that. And I think the shutdown is part of that, and Doge is part of that too. But now that the money is being shut off from the government, how much you want to bet that a lot of corporations are trying to cut costs? This is from Disclosed TV. This is from October 21st. Amazon plans to robotize 75% of its operations, translating more than 600,000 people Amazon will ultimately replace with robots. This was the day after the AWS outage, and we're going to go over that. Amanda Goodall says, while Amazon replaces 600,000 American jobs with robots by 2033, let's not forget, Amazon has pledged to create 2 million direct and indirect jobs in India by 2025. And American workers are like, hold up, you're laying me off to hire offshore and replace me with robots? Make this make sense. That was October 21st. October 20th was the day of the AWS outage, Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is probably the main segment of that company that actually makes money, that makes a profit. Because all their retail stuff they sell at a loss. They price it so low that they undercut all the other retail chains. That's why we have a retail apocalypse. Same with Walmart. AWS US East 1 is down again. Half the internet just broke. So this is James Ethereum. He says signals. So a lot of corporate websites like Uber, like McDonald's, like we might go through a list here, but a lot of companies rely on Amazon Web Services for their, for their own websites, for their own tech, and it went down. James says Signal's having a sleep in. Even AWS support is down, so you can't complain about AWS being down. This is what renting your infrastructure gets you. One DNS hiccup, and millions suddenly realize they don't control anything. Some Ethereum validators run on AWS, and Ethereum is the baseline blockchain on which Ether runs. So Ether is a cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, Ether, XRP, they all run on different devices all around the world. They're not controlled, but they have nodes all around the world. Some Ethereum validators run on AWS, but while other services are down, Ethereum keeps producing blocks. That's the difference between using infrastructure and depending on it. So, yeah. The name of the game is centralization. Centralization is bad. Decentralization is good. I said this before about law enforcement. A lot of Democrats, including Obama, say they want a nationwide law enforcement agency. I mean, we already have the FBI and the U.S. Marshals, but if we have a nationwide law enforcement, agency that's essentially controlled from Washington, that's not going to really. There's no escaping that. We need local law enforcement too, like police and sheriffs, because if one police department is crooked, at least a police department in another area is decent. So there's not a single point of failure. We're gonna. This video is almost 3 minutes long. We're gonna listen to it. Hustle Bitch says AWS went down and dragged half the internet with it. GitHub, Slack, New Relic, Coinbase, Signal, nearly all of the most important sites all offline at once. Engineers say the service never goes down until it did. This Amazon Web Services outage is one of the largest in history. What if this was a stress test to see how fast the web can collapse? We're gonna listen to this guy. What he's saying here is, pausing it. I make websites, and the dirty little secret about websites is no one makes them from scratch anymore. No one like codes them by hand anymore, unless you're part of a big organization and you have like an army of people doing it. You a lot of times you use third-party assets that are made by someone else, and you kind of like cobble it together like a hot rod. You take a template, you customize it in the code a little bit, you add parts here and there, like different programs or apps or plugins, and all these different like third-party apps are hosted somewhere or made somewhere. So if a third-party app in this, no, that's websites. He's talking about like maybe deeper like web services. A lot of these websites have, even if your website or industry is not hosted on Amazon Web Services, maybe one of your third-party components is hosted on Amazon Web Services. So that's how you got taken out. You never know. Everyone. I don't know what he means by reinvent, but I was listening to Clownfish TV talk about this, Neon Geeky Sparkles. Neon said the internet seems different from his perspective after the after the outage, and he thinks that maybe some things have been rolled out. And if you listen to the X-22 report, Dave always says, the deep state players, Babylon or whatever, the criminal syndicate, the Illuminati, whatever, they like to use invisible threats. In 2020, they used a disease. They used COVID to really impose the will and fortify the 2020 election and get people, inside and jobless. They either need a new virus or they need some sort of like other type of invisible threat or disaster. So maybe they'll use a so-called cyber attack. And how do you attack the entire internet? Well, you centralize it. And how much you want to bet Amazon Web Services has a big leg up thanks to government grants? I mean, I don't think those shows have covered that, but we've established before in past podcasts that Twitter had a leg up from the government, from the intel services, because Twitter cannot make a profit. It cannot survive as long as it has without some outside assistance, some outside investment. How much you want to bet that Amazon is propped up by either the government or the central banks and their Wall Street money? That's how they got so big, and that's how they were able to entice everyone to centralize their own infrastructure with them. I'm going to read this post here by Expose It. The AWS outage may have stemmed from a human trust breach, an alleged insider with elevated admin privileges. It was a calculated move to demonstrate control. A festival-timed Diwali. Yeah, Diwali was that Indian holiday. Disruption was to show dependency on Indian H-1Bs and provide leverage for lobbying interests. Okay. Yeah, I did make a joke. I made a joke about that on one of my alt accounts on Twitter, but yeah. Indians don't have a holiday, they take the day off, and look what happens. But maybe there's truth to that. But I do think that the outage is a cover for a lot of things. And it just so happens that one of Amazon's subsidiaries is having trouble too. That subsidiary is Twitch, which is a competitor to YouTube and Rumble, all that. Twitch is having a huge controversy. Twitch is big in like the gaming world and pop culture because a lot of young people, they play games, they show themselves playing games on, live stream themselves playing video games. A lot of young, attractive women, live stream and they take donations and super chats from thirsty men. Emiru, in this picture here, she's not overtly lewd, but she's an attractive young lady, and I'm sure she has a big following. There's a convention a couple weeks ago of Twitch, big Twitch streamers, and she got assaulted by a crazed fan. When I say assaulted, she got groped, and this is like the last straw for her because apparently she's been treated terribly by Twitch's upper management and also by fellow Twitch streamers. And this last weekend, she came forward with a lot of about her abusive relationship with another Twitch streamer. But I'll say that if you follow like channels like It's a Gundam or It's a Gundam mainly, Twitch is a cesspool of bad behavior. Hassan Piker, that's another Twitch streamer that's like absolutely corrupt. He's the biggest left-wing content creator there is. He is openly called for violence against Americans. He says America deserved 9/11, and he will not get banned from the platform for his obviously illegal criminal speech. Like, free speech is one thing, but calling for violence and crime is another. He's been treated with kid gloves. And the troubles with Twitch are coming to a head, and this AWS outage might be another cover story to clean house of Twitch. Neon from Cloudfish TV says, video, did Twitch fuck around and find out? Amazon's 40,000 layoffs hit Twitch hard after Emiru controversy. This is from today. So Amazon isn't just laying off, warehouse workers. They're laying off, white collar workers at headquarters, and they're laying off people at Twitch HQ. Amazon has laid off over 14,000 employees, and this includes many longtime employees of Twitch. Could this be a FAFO moment for the streamer after months of declining viewership and scandal, including Hassan and Emiru? Possibly. And I'll link to his the Clownfish video. Stock Market News says, I'm afraid Amazon's 30,000 job cuts are just the beginning. Leaked documents reveal that the company's robotics team plans to automate 75% of operations. Okay, we've heard that already. And I don't know if this video is real or if it's AI generated, but I only know of a few robots that can, bipedal robots that actually walk and do labor like humans can. Is this real? Of course, Amazon can afford that many robots, but wow. Now, switching gears somewhat, Kobisi later says, this has been a historic earnings season. So far, 69% of U.S. companies have beaten revenue expectations in Q3 2025, the highest since 6.1% in Q4 2021. This versus is a significant improvement from 53% a year ago. This is also on track to be the fifth strongest quarter in at least 13 years. By comparison, a record during this period was 83.1%. However, all eyes are on the Magnificent Seven stocks, which are set to report this week, including Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft. The Magnificent Seven stocks are the seven tech stocks that are really dominating the stock market. I mean, you hear talk about the stock market making, massive all-time highs and gains. It's mainly just seven stocks out of hundreds of other publicly traded companies. But because so much money is going into AI. But if other traditional non-AI tech companies are experiencing growth, that's just testament to how much deregulation helps. Coming back to the EBT conversation here, this is Matt Walsh. The number one thing that artificially inflates the price of groceries is the food stamp program. Well, there's also printing money, but that's something else. The federal government is subsidizing groceries for 40 million people, which obviously drives up the cost. That's why the increase in the cost of groceries tracks exactly with the increase in the number of people on food stamps. So as a functional, contributing, working American, you are getting scammed twice. Once when the government steals from your paycheck and gives it to EBT recipients, and again when you go to the grocery store, you're paying twice so that some morbidly obese people can buy Doritos on your dime. Infuriating. Yep. Same goes for the cost of college. Same goes to the cost of healthcare, and we're gonna touch on housing a little bit later, but yeah. Justin, this is from yesterday. U.S. announces a $490 billion investment deals with Japan, which includes nuclear reactors, large-scale power equipment, construction, and engineering services. So Japan just elected a new prime minister, their first female prime minister. Like a lot of first female prime ministers in a lot of countries, she's a conservative. She's a huge fan of Margaret Thatcher. So I forget her name, but Trump just went over and paid her a visit. And I think they watched the World Series together and they had a good time. She was all smiles. Something about her, she's radiant. I forget her name, but she just seems kind of cool. But this is important. Nuclear reactors, large-scale power equipment, construction, and engineering services. America has let its nuclear power infrastructure decline ever since the 80s and that whole nuclear freeze movement. Japan has not, even though they've been targeted by a nuclear attack. How much you want to bet Trump is making deals with countries to utilize their infrastructure, like their technology, like nuclear power and large-scale power equipment, because we've got to build up our manufacturing and power infrastructure here at home. So many manufacturing jobs have been exported, been taken away from the U.S. really since we came off the gold standard, but especially in the last maybe 40 years, maybe 20 or 30 years, they're replaced by service jobs. We need to bring manufacturing back if we're going to actually be a self-sustaining economy. And part of that's because we came off the gold standard and the value of the dollar deteriorated compared to the cost of living. So in order to pay a living wage to workers, they'd have to increase the cost of goods, and they couldn't hide that. So they offshored their companies offshored their manufacturing. I think this is a sign that we're going back to sound money. We're either going back to the gold standard. We might even bring back silver as money. We might include alternative money like Bitcoin. Disclose says, U.S. Okay, I read that already. Eric Doherty says, experts proven wrong once again as GE Appliances $3.5 billion investment in USA manufacturing just sparked the launch of an American rail in Louisville, which will transport goods nationwide. That's being launched by two top rail companies, Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific. GE is using it. Trump was right again. Manufacturing is officially reshoring. And why is manufacturing reshoring? Because of tariffs. If a company is going to manufacture outside of this country, it's going to get hit with tariffs. So it's better for the country to manufacture in the U.S. And during the whole tariff story back in April, we found out, other countries have been tariffing us, and that's why we can't sell our stuff to them. So, all right, turnabout's fair play. Back to the SNAP benefits conversation. This is Awakened Outlaw. He says, when SNAP benefits resume, and yes, they will resume, what if they came back online, minus a whole bunch of people that shouldn't be getting benefits? I realize the government shut down, mostly, but I can see this being a possibility. Gotta admit, it'd be one hell of an opportunity to scour, analyze, sort the data. You could do updates, or even replace part or all of the back end while the existing system was offline. How many opportunities would you ever get to do precisely this? Exactly. This is an opportunity. I say this assuming the entire tech infrastructure that is being used is your typical patchwork government hot mess, and almost certainly compromised given the amount of money moving through the system. I think everyone paying attention would agree that there's about a 0% chance that the deep state wasn't drinking from the fountain, guzzling even. Interesting to think about. Time will tell. So he's saying that, yeah, there's probably been a lot of, embezzlement going on with SNAP benefits too. So not just money for illegals or foreigners or slackers. I get help from my family, but my mom insists on supporting my brother too. And he and his wife probably make 6 figures, so it's like we keep it in the family. And I can manage just fine driving Uber where I live. If I was, if I didn't have to tiptoe around certain people, but that's a personal issue. Okay. Actually, Tina Turtle Tourist era FF14 says these are all useless degrees. Every single computer science, physics, engineering, and chemistry major I know who graduated this year can't get anything. Can't get a job. It's bad. It's 2008 bad. Well, I graduated college in 2002, and I got an internship right away for the summer. And after that, I struggled. Job market was bad in the early 2000s, not just 2008, not just now. I mean, I struggled to find a job because I have ADHD, for one thing. But also, no one really wanted to hire full-time with benefits. They wanted to hire temp workers. So I hopped from one temp job to another, and I was made to feel bad about it because I didn't have any steady retirement plan. But turns out I was just ahead of the curve. Companies either cannot afford to hire full-time or they don't want to hire full-time. They want to keep that money to themselves. And it's only gotten worse since AI. So, my major was in liberal arts. These are things that you can use AI for. So, when I talk to people about AI and the job market, I tell them, you can either worry about AI taking your job, or you can be excited about using AI to run your own business, start your own hustle. I mean, really before the Industrial Revolution, everyone was either self-employed or a farmer, or they worked for your feudal lord. But I think nature's the way God intended is for us to all have our own mom and pop shops. We just need to clean up all the regulations and government interference. Now, this is important. This is from October 26th. Kobe, see you later again. Shocking stat of the day. The U.S. government now spends about 23 cents on every dollar of revenue on interest expense, near the highest level of the century. This comes as interest expenditures exceed $1.2 trillion over the last 12 months for the first time. Interest costs have doubled over the last 4 years as both rates of federal debt have surged. As a result, interest expense as a percent of tax revenue jumped plus 10 percentage points, or plus 70% to 23% during this period. That's a lot of jargon. For perspective, the government spent 10% of its revenue on interest on average before 2020. Interest will soon be the U.S. government's largest expense. So interest on the loan, interest on the national debt. There's a lot of talk about whether interest is a Jewish, invention. I think it's more of a Babylonian invention, and a lot of people just get saddled with it. But charging interest on a loan is specifically forbidden in the Bible. It's really theft. I mean, and really it creates negative money. It's the country borrows money from the central bank at interest, but there's not enough money to pay that interest, so we have to borrow more to pay that interest. But there's interest on top of that interest, and it keeps going. I did a video a few years ago about there being more debt than money in the world. There's more debt in U.S. dollars than there are actual U.S. dollars in the world. It's like 2 to 1. Or maybe even 7 to 1. I need to go back and look at the numbers again. But so how do we pay off that debt? Oh, we'll get to that. I promise we're going to get to that. Breaking: the U.S. Department of Energy forms a $1 billion partnership with AMD to build 2 supercomputers. The U.S. government knows they must join the AI arms race. Now, why is AI important to the government? We're going to get to that, but AI is very important. We need to really, advance AI to the point that it helps us rather than, replaces us. As Grum said. Whoa. I want to read this one. This is from Observing Consciousness. First, tariffs cut off the globalist middlemen. The IMF, World Bank, Bank of International Settlements, BlackRock, etc., who laundered and leveraged nations through debt slavery and black market trade routes. The Southcom is cutting off the cartel lifelines. Oh, this is about the Okay, let's go back to this. He's commenting on this post from earlier. While Southcom strangles the narco state pipelines, Venezuela, Mexico, and Cambodia. So the drug traffickers, this is pertinent. While preparing to topple them, the Trump admin is removing their political leaders embedded in the U.S. government. All the while, the DC federalization template is taking out the deep state. So these narco gangsters, these narco states who are smuggling drugs in the country, they're probably smuggling a lot more. This is what Observing Consciousness is saying. First, tariffs cut off the globalist middlemen, the IMF, World Bank, Bank of International Settlements, BlackRock, etc., who laundered and leveraged nations through debt slavery and black market trade routes. Black market. Then Southcom is cutting off the cartel lifelines running through the Eastern Pacific, Caribbean, Central American land bridges, and Venezuelan coastal corridors, shutting down the maritime, air, and overland trafficking lanes that once fed the global narco state network. Deep state is feeling the pinch. Northcom is moving the DC federalization template state to state, taking out the deep state proxy terrorist groups such as the Tren de Aragua, Antifa, NGOs, and politicians standing in the way. Trump froze the Middle East into a peace deal. The whole deep state system is locked down. Boom, diggity. So what we're supposed to be saying here is the secret ingredient is crime. I mean, the secret ingredient for a lot of, how a lot of these governments or, political parties get ahead is crime, black market trade, maybe even sex trafficking. Terrorists, Hamas, Palestinian government, the deep state in Israel. There is a deep state in Israel. I mean, October 7th couldn't have happened unless someone in Israel's high command let it happen. I don't think it was Netanyahu, but someone in Israel did. But my point is, the deep state couldn't exist without a criminal activity under the table. And what Trump is doing is he's taking it out. So Trump is able to secure a peace deal in the Middle East and Israel by taking out the supply lines. We covered this already. It's about AWS. Now, Wall Street Mav is responding to Peter St. Ong. Let's read Peter St. Ong's post first. Inflation is cooling despite tariffs that were supposed to do the hyperinflation. This greenlights Fed cuts that could never deliver millions of jobs in a Trump boom at the risk of inflation that won't come until 2027. So let's listen. I like that Peter St. Ong is promoting I Trust Capital. I really like I Trust Capital. That's who I have my retirement through. So take advantage of yourselves. Link in the description. Okay, that's enough. So what Peter says is Trump is fighting inflation through energy production, lowering energy costs, and tariffs. You know, I listened to Trump and Elon's conversation on X a couple years ago, and it sounded like they disagreed on the source of inflation, but they were both right. Elon said government spending causes inflation. Trump said energy prices cause inflation. They're both right. And until we can take care of government spending, Trump is doing what he can to lower the cost of energy. The cost of energy drives the cost of everything else in the economy. I mean, it's the foundation. It's the undercurrent of everything else. So if you can lower the cost of energy, you can lower the cost of everything else. In addition to getting rid of the illegal alien parasites that are mooching off us. Joe Lang again. He's always good. He says, do you understand how fast worldwide transformation of the financial system can happen? He's saying this on October 15th. Where Wall Street goes, the entire world's financial system goes. If Wall Street banks are forced to comply using decentralized blockchain technology for transparency and compliance, then whoever does business on Wall Street will be forced to comply also. Centralization is actually the Achilles heel of the entire fiat system. Trump controls the entire system because he controls the Fed, the world's reserve currency, and Wall Street. So remember, during Trump's first term, he combined the Federal Reserve with the Treasury. So he's able to take control of the Fed. Now, why would he let the Fed do what he's doing? Well, maybe he's using them. Maybe he's being a Judas here and letting them show themselves. But continuing, anybody doing business on Wall Street or in the U.S. will be forced to comply with the same standards and regulations. That will accelerate transformation worldwide into a decentralized financial system, which is transparent because it's on blockchain technology. Transformation acceleration. So, he's responding to another. Yeah, I think this is a long post, but we're going to read it because it's about New York and Mamdani. Here's a story that I don't think anybody noticed. There's a mayor race going on in New York, and everyone is focused on Mamdani. But no one is paying attention to what the current mayor of New York is doing on his way out the door. Have you heard what Mayor Eric Adams just announced? New York City Mayor Eric Adams announced the establishment of a municipal digital assets and blockchain office in a bid to cement his crypto agenda in the final months of his term. In a Tuesday notice from the mayor's office, Adams said he had used an executive order under his authority to create an Office of Digital Assets and Blockchain Technology. Moises Rendon, who has worked as a digital assets and blockchain policy advisor for New York City since April 2024, will head the newly established office. Doesn't that seem like a big deal? With less than 3 months left in office, Mayor Adams established a blockchain office and municipal digital assets. Why wait until the last minute? All part of the plan. It reminds me of Trump's move to put Chris Miller as the head of the DoD right before he left office. Adams has been a big proponent of Bitcoin since he became mayor. I don't think that's a coincidence. Is Adams coordinating with Trump? Trump and Adams have been working together for a while now. Do you think the timing of this move, after Trump pushed stablecoin legislation into law, that was the Genius Act, is just a coincidence? Why would the establishment of blockchain technology and digital assets be so important in New York? Timing is everything. Wall Street is in New York. So are big Wall Street banks. Did you know these banks are pushing blockchain technology? They're being forced to comply. New York's Banking Watch, John, just raised the bar. The Department of Financial Services now requires all state chartered banks and foreign branches to use blockchain and analytics in their compliance programs. For the first time, traditional finance is being pushed into blockchain-level transparency. Why does this matter? It matters that it signals that regulators no longer treat digital assets as a passing fad. They're embedding crypto oversight into the heart of banking. Did you catch 3 key words? Transparency, compliance, and oversight. The banking system is being transformed before our eyes. Wall Street banks are being forced to comply with blockchain technology in order to create transparency and decentralization. Screening wallets, verifying sources of funds, and flagging sanction risks isn't just for exchanges anymore. Even legacy banks must adopt crypto-native monitoring tools like chain analysis now. The shift highlights a growing reality. Compliance drives adoption, and as oversight tightens, the demand for smarter, safer crypto wallets also grows. Compliance drives adoption. Wall Street banks that used to control everything are now being forced into compliance. Superintendent Adrian Harris and the NYDFS have made it clear in their guidance every state chartered bank and foreign branch in New York must fold blockchain analytics into their compliance stack. Tools like chain analysis or Elliptic, once reserved for crypto exchanges, are now part of traditional banking oversight. Blockchain technology is already being implemented in New York, and Mayor Adams is now accelerating its use. Do you think the timing of this transformation happening just during a fast rally in gold and silver is just coincidence? Yeah, because gold and silver have been rallying. The COMEX exchange is also in New York. Industry analysts now say New York's move could serve as a template for regulators nationwide. By forcing banks into blockchain analytics, NYDFS is effectively normalizing these tools as part of mainstream finance. What was once an edge case for crypto exchanges is now on track to become a standard across the nation's banking sector. The guidance leaves room for flexibility as each institution can tailor its framework to its size and risk appetite. So, that's really big news. I mean, if we can reform Wall Street and the financial system, New York could probably cut, Mom Downey under his knees. He won't be able to do as much damage. Maybe he will, and I'll just serve to teach New Yorkers that the stove is hot, that you can't trust his brand of Islam, communism, what have you. So, or foreign interference. Okay, endgame macro. Holy crap, this is another long post, but it's about Venezuela, Guyana, and Colombia suddenly matter a lot. Monroe Doctrine 2.0. I'll read the first two paragraphs and decide if I want to read the whole thing. Strip away the rhetoric, and Washington's fixation on the northern rim of South America is about two things. Who controls the hemisphere's next decade of oil flows, and who controls the choke points and minerals that power modern industry? Venezuela holds the world's largest crude reserves, with heavy barrels tailor-made for U.S. Gulf Coast refineries. Guyana has become one of the fastest-growing oil provinces on Earth, anchored by a U.S. operator. Layer onto that, this scramble for rare earths and magnet materials, and Beijing's tighter export controls on the heavy REEs used in advanced weapons and EVs, and you get the real logic for a modern Monroe Doctrine. The United States is trying to redraw supply lines so that American and allied firms, not China or Russia, anchor the energy and mineral streams coming out of the Americas. Venezuela is the fulcrum. Beyond sanctions talk, the practical U.S. aim is to prevent Caracas from mortgaging its oil system to Chinese and Russian state companies or using barrels as geopolitical leverage. That explains pressure campaigns, naval and air shows of force in the Caribbean, and talk of covert authorities, crowd out outside patrons, deter adventurers against neighbors, and keep a channel open for managed production growth that stabilizes prices without ceding control to Beijing. It also explains the obsession with the Escobedo dispute. If Venezuela coerced Guyana, it would directly threaten a U.S. major's flagship project and America's preferred marginal barrel. So it goes on, but this is why Venezuela and Colombia are such a big deal, and why the Navy and the Department of Defense, the Department of War, I should say, now, current day, are taking such an interest in blowing up drug trafficking boats. The quartering, he's talking about Toast. He's responding to a post by Matt Forney, so we'll read Matt Forney's post first. New, a whistleblower working for Toast Inc. details how the company has been taken over by Indians. As soon as our Indians took over, they canned our payroll center director, who built the department, and sent 550 jobs to India. Now our rates are down, and customers beg to speak to someone who speaks English. He adds that he's been with the company for several years and cannot get promoted, nor can any of his white male coworkers. So India has taken over this tech company, like a lot of companies. And the quartering says there are too many cases of this to count. It all comes down to corporate greed. India's average IQ is 75. That's barely over the line of medically retarded. They've been selling out American people for years, and the guys, they're replacing them with geniuses. So, yeah, there's a grift coming out of India. I don't know about the average IQ of India being that, but Just as there's a deep state in this country, there's a criminal element in this country. There's a criminal element in India. There's a deep state in India who want to undercut the U.S. So I'm not racist against Indians. I just hate Indian criminals, just like I hate criminals from any country. So there. Okay, we read this already. This is from Joling about blockchain. Now, this is important. You've heard about Trump deploying the National Guard in Chicago and Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was the test run. It was kind of like the introduction to this mobilization. Nominally, it was to clean up crime, but one of it was also to clean out a lot of other corruption, like arrest deep state criminals. What if Trump is using his authority as the commander in chief of the federal government to root out corruption in other cities? Endgame Macro has this post. He says, infrastructure footprint hiding in plain sight. If you map where National Guard deployments have actually happened or been proposed, such as Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Memphis, the court paused movements in Chicago and Portland, and the possible extensions to New York, Baltimore, New Orleans, St. Louis, and San Francisco, Oakland, it looks like a diagram of the country's operating system. Those dots fall almost perfectly on top of the infrastructure and logistics hubs that government and think tank studies repeatedly label as nationally critical. The big coastal ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach, and New York, New Jersey, Oakland, Baltimore, and the lower Gulf terminals move most of the nation's containers, vehicles, and bulk cargo. The New Orleans-Baton Rouge corridor is the choke point of the Mississippi River, where barges carry much of America's grain and petrochemical exports. Portland anchors the Columbia Snake System, the country's largest wheat export route. Chicago is the nation's rail and intermodal nerve center. A third of all freight railroad freight passes through it. Memphis, with FedEx's super hub, is the heartbeat of air cargo. Along with Southern Flank, Laredo and other border crossings are now essential to the U.S. and Mexico manufacturing supply chains. And the D.C., Baltimore, Northern Virginia, and New York corridor houses the government, capital markets, and digital infrastructure that DHS calls national critical. When federal planners talk about continuity of flows, these are the places that always show up. The single bridge, yard, or server farm, and any of them can ripple the entire economy. Hello, AWS. I'm not suggesting these deployments are anything more than what's been publicly stated, which is for crime prevention and immigration enforcement, but it's worth noting how strategically important these areas are. The geography itself hints at a broader logic, a quieter focus on securing the junctions that keep modern life running. Hold the major ports, the Mississippi export belt, the Chicago rail nexus, the Memphis air cargo hub, the key border crossings, and the DC-NY Nova Communications and Finance Corps, and you protect the country's ability to move goods, energy, and information through almost any shock. Whether by design or coincidence, the current deployment map mirrors the blueprint of America's critical infrastructure. Boom. So, is the National Guard expecting an attack, a cyber attack, maybe? An invisible threat, like a cyber attack or a virus, or both? Are there enemy infiltrators in the country? Illegal alien terrorists? Of course there are. This is a national security. This is a national security issue. I'm going to refresh the page because all of a sudden I know I have more posts than that. Because we got to talk about beef. Oh, come on. Actually, no, I think this covers it. Topic of beef. This is from Tan Man. Now, Trump just made a deal with Argentina to import Argentinian beef, and a lot of the critics are saying, oh, no, he's undercutting American cattle ranchers. Well, until we can take care of the cattle beef cartel in America, we need to import beef to lower the prices. Tan Man says, all beef sold at retail in the U.S. must be slaughtered at USDA-inspected slaughterhouse facilities. No matter if you raise 2 animals or 2,000, it must go through such a facility. Obviously, these facilities get very large due to due to the scale economies of complying with the regulations. So small farmers have to struggle to do biz with them. No one wants to deal with tiny customers, or they go to a smaller slaughterhouse where costs are higher. If the regulatory environment did not directly encourage the proliferation of huge slaughterhouses and made it easier for small-scale ones to operate, then costs for ranchers would be much lower and beef would be much cheaper. So that's why the shutdown is so important. That's why we're cutting all the waste in government, getting rid of the regulations, making it easier for smaller businesses, for smaller farmers. Regional and Legal talks about this all the time. Smaller businesses struggle because of regulations. Bigger companies actually promote, their lobbyists actually promote regulations. They say it's for, consumer protection, but it's really to make it harder for competitors to climb up and take them on. That hurts small businesses and startups. In order to be a successful startup, you have to have connections with the government. You have to kiss the ring. So we're going to move on to what we really owe, but I think we're going to have another commercial break. The right to bear arms is vital to the self-defense of Americans, and it's enshrined in our Second Amendment. But did you know your right to privacy is just as important? If criminals, corporations, or even the government learned your secrets, you'd be at their mercy. That's why the Fourth Amendment protects Americans and requires law enforcement to obtain warrants before they search you. The bad news is, online, big tech colludes with government to bypass the Fourth Amendment. This was revealed in the Twitter files. The good news is, you can guard your online privacy with a VPN. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and it masks your computer's IP address and browsing history. I'm proud to partner with NordVPN, the industry leader. With one NordVPN account, you can guard multiple electronic devices. You can share files between your protected devices, and you can set your VPN to other countries. That way you can access content that's not available in your region. Again, that's NordVPN, the #1 VPN in the world. Click on my link and protect yourself from prying eyes. Okay. Unpopular opinion. The Fourth Amendment is more important than the Second Amendment because information is more important than force. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So you want the king to be as blind as possible. Now, I created this folder called What Do We Really Owe? And it goes back to a lot of the Doge findings earlier this year, like in March, and a lot of tweets. Now, why is this important? Because we covered why the shutdown is happening. We got to cover why it's important. I mean, nominally, it's about a spending bill on protecting the money for illegal aliens, but we have to cut waste in government. I mean, and we have to prove that a lot of that should be canceled. That's big, and that can be explained by the 14th Amendment. But coming back to this text by Truth Hammer Forever, what is odious debt? Be a darn shame if everyone learned what this means and told the Fed to take a hike. Odious debt refers to debt incurred by a government or regime that is considered illegitimate or not in the best interest of the nation's people, often because it was contracted under oppressive, corrupt, or non-democratic conditions. The concept suggests that such debts should not be enforceable against the population, especially after a regime change, as they were not used for the public's benefit. That's why election integrity is so important. Key debt characteristics of odious debt include lack of consent. The debt was incurred without the consent of the people, typically under a dictatorship or authoritarian regime, and no benefit to the public. The borrowed funds that were used for purposes that did not serve the population, such as personal enrichment of leaders or suppression of citizens. So does that qualify? Does all the government spending, all the government waste, does that qualify? Hell yeah. So that should not be considered part of the national debt, or even your state or local government debt. This post from the Last Refuge. Part of the reason the corrupt DC system is so transparently predictable is precisely because everyone engaged in events has a vested interest to retain the corruption. Cynical publicists can't cover this, so when you peel down the onion, when you get through the smoke to the fire, when you go deep into the rabbit hole and finally reach the dead end, you discover the root of everything that permeates everything in DC is money. It's not ideology, it's money. Stephen Miller says, said on May 25th, I've seen a few claims making the rounds on the one big beautiful bill that require correction. The first is that, okay, yeah, I think we got to read this here because there was a big controversy about the big beautiful bill, and Stephen Miller is an elite level explainer. The first is that it doesn't codify the Doge cuts. A reconciliation bill, which is a budget bill that passes with 50 votes, is limited by Senate rules to mandatory spending only, e.g. Medicaid and food stamps. The Senate rules prevent it from cutting discretionary spending, e.g. the Department of Education or federal grants. The Doge cuts are overwhelmingly discretionary, not mandatory. The bill saves more than $1.6 trillion in mandatory spending, including the largest ever welfare reform, a remarkable achievement. I've also seen claims the bill increases the deficit. This lie is based on a Congressional Budget Office accounting gimmick. Income tax rates from the 2017 tax cut are set to expire in September. They're always planned to be permanent. CBO says maintaining current rates adds to the deficit, but by definition, leaving these income tax rates unchanged cannot add one penny to the deficit. The bill's spending cuts reduce the deficit against the current law baseline, which is the only correct baseline to use. Another fantastically false claim is that the bill spends trillions of dollars. This is just completely invented out of whole cloth. This is not a 10 years budget bill. It doesn't fund almost any operations of government, which are funded in the annual budget bills, which this is not. In other words, if this bill is passed, but the annual budget bill did not, there'd be no government funding. Under the math that critics are using, if we pass a one-paragraph reconciliation bill that cuts simply $50 billion in food stamp spending, they can say that the bill added trillions in spending, and that because they're counting all the projected federal spending that exists entirely outside the scope of this legislation, which is of course preposterous. The only funding in the bill is for the president's border and defense priorities, while enacting a net spending cut of over $1.6 trillion. The bill has two fiscal components: a massive tax cut and a massive spending cut. Mike Johnson said, we are not cutting Medicaid. There are 1.4 million illegals on Medicaid, and there are 4.8 million able-bodied individuals on Medicaid who choose not to work. That is called fraud, and that is what we are eliminating. So that would be considered odious debt because it's stealing from the taxpayers. Eric Doherty again. Trump responds to Elon Musk criticizing the big beautiful bill for not enough spending cuts. So let's actually listen to the video. Yeah, it sure is. Okay. Well, that's that. Charlie Kirk, rest in peace. He posted this on May 27th. Breaking. The Trump administration is moving to cut all remaining contracts and financial ties with Harvard University. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. The administration estimates about 30 contracts, collectively worth $100 million, could be up for review. Last week, the Trump administration and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem pulled Harvard's permission to enroll international students or host foreign researchers. So that's another thing we got to figure out. Remember, education, higher education. That's a racket if there ever was one. I mean, it is now, especially with the internet and AI. I mean, there's so much information you get off the internet. I mean, John Crestani, the entrepreneur YouTuber, he says you really ought to only go to college for three things: engineering, law, and medicine. Anything else you can learn online for a lot less money. And I agree with that. Now, taxes. Trump has suggested that we eliminate the income tax. We got to get the votes of Congress to do it. Either that or we abolish the United States corporation, which ought to be on the table anyway. But Joe Lang again, Trump isn't just floating this idea. You don't tell millions of Americans that you are looking to eliminate their income taxes unless that's exactly what you're planning on doing. President Donald Trump doubled down Sunday. He's posted this on April 28th. On his plan to use tariff revenue to slash and possibly eliminate income taxes for millions of Americans. The president took to Truth Social to tout his vision, claiming that his sweeping tariffs could lead to big tax breaks for workers making under $200,000 a year. When tariffs cut in, many people's income taxes will be substantially reduced, and maybe even completely eliminated. Focus will be on people making less than $200,000 a year, Trump wrote. It was always a huge part of the plan. You eliminate the power of the Fed and the IRS when you give the people the power over every dollar they earn. Power back to the people. Trump knows that once he allows American people to keep every one of their hard-earned dollars, it will do two things. Put a check on Congress, speeding spending or speed up the bankruptcy of the Fed and the entire world's financial debt system, maybe both. It was always the plan. And that's why someone tried to kill him last year. Whenever a president either proposes to or actually succeeds in taking on the banking cabal, he gets shot at. Andrew Jackson took on the Second Central Bank of the United States. Someone took a shot at him. William McKinley funded the government through tariffs. He was assassinated. JFK wanted to use silver certificates. He was assassinated. Reagan wanted to audit the gold in Fort Knox. He got shot. Trump is taking on the central banks again. He was shot in the ear. If God hadn't intervened and turned his head at just the right time, history would be different. I mean, Butler, Pennsylvania is the reason I am all on board with President Trump, because God is with President Trump. Okay. Now, data Republican, again. Congress doesn't stop. What's she referring to here? I think this is a USA Post. Let's read this. Congress doesn't stop it because Congress is deeply complicit. She's referring to this post by Gotta Know Truth. Gotta Know Truth asks, what do you think all of this putting the dots together stuff? I can't believe we didn't see this before, that Congress didn't prevent it. Putting the dots together of all the different corruption. Congress doesn't stop it because Congress is deeply complicit. Senators and representatives allocate taxpayer dollars to USAID. That's only the start. The International Republican Institute, IRI, and National Democrat Institute, NDI, both recipients of USAID funding, include actively serving members of Congress on their boards. These same organizations also serve the ACVFA, the advisory body that workshops where USAID money flows. The presidents of IRI, NDI, and U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, USGLC, all hold seats at ACFA. Gates Foundation and other members of USGLC also sit on ACFA. Gates Foundation, is that referring to Bill Gates? USGLC, meanwhile, operates as a revolving door. Former senators and representatives from both parties serve in its leadership, and internal emails show the group actively pursuing newly elected members of Congress to bring them up into its fold. This recruitment involves regular dinners, direct outreach, and strategic lobbying. That's why I coined it the Ouroboros of interest. It's an infinite money hack. It's the reason why our deficit spending is out of control, and it's also the reason why Congress refuses to stop any of its spending. Yep. Here's another way we can cut costs. Shadow Visor points out on March 6th, a new investigation uncovers the Biden presidency was largely run by an auto pen. Nearly every document bearing Biden's signature during his time in office uses the exact same auto pen imprint. The findings suggest the presidency operated without a real president. Well, I never called Biden the president unless I was quoting someone else. He was never the president. I refuse to acknowledge that. And if YouTube wants to censor me, that's fine, because I get more views on Rumble anyway. I like YouTube. I like a lot of YouTube creators, but I'm going to make my home on Rumble. This is important. Joe Lang, he's actually responding to the question I asked back in April. Trump took control of the Fed in 2019 when he rolled into the Treasury. Trump actually controls the entire global debt system because he controls the most powerful central bank and the world's reserve currency. He's forcing the Fed to eat a lot of bad debt and is going to bankrupt them and bring down the whole system. I wrote a Substack article on that subject years ago. Here's the link. So, again, we don't have time to read the whole thing, but Joe Lang always points out that Trump is a master of bankruptcy. He's been bankrupt multiple times in his business, and he always bounces back. So he understands the system, and he understands how to use it in order to bring down the banking cabal. Oh, Social Security. There's a big fuss when Doge got into Social Security. Awakening Outlaw says there's only one real reason why there's such a vast effort to keep Doge from looking into Social Security. And if you believe that has anything to do with being concerned or for legit reasons, you're either dumb as fuck or involved in the massive grift being exposed. So what's going on with Social Security? Well, a lot of illegals were getting Social Security numbers, and that's how ICE knows who to arrest without a warrant. Everyone's bitching about ICE snatching people from the streets. Well, ICE knows who was who, thanks to Doge, thanks to Elon finding out who's got phony Social Security numbers. Christopher Rufo says, "Scoop: the Department of Education has terminated $1 billion in grants." This was back on April 29th. That were intended to support school-based mental health programs, but were being used to advance left-wing radicalism and discrimination. No more slush fund for activists under the guise of mental health. And how much of that mental health supposedly was towards the transgender agenda? Now, this is big. Back in March, court unleashes Doge. Elon gets access to federal treasury data. Elon just scored another massive win. A federal judge has ruled that his Department of Government Efficiency can access U.S. Treasury data, including federal salaries, Social Security info, and tax refunds. The plaintiffs tried to block it, claiming Doge had too much unchecked power, but the judge wasn't buying it. While he called the concerns understandable, he ruled that there's no proof Elon plans to start leaking people's tax refunds or exposing government bloat without safeguards. Translation: Washington just lost another excuse to hide where your money is going. Elon 1, bureaucracy 0. Source The Independent. So, no, Elon's not stealing through your personal information. But even if it was, why does the government have that information? Think about that. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I want to say Alpha Layer. Okay, makes a really good point about taxes. He or she says it's sometimes lost on people that before the days of property taxes and income taxes, people didn't need money. You could work a few hours feeding chickens and cows and enjoy days of free time and family building. Money was only needed by some single invention a year, and earning enough for that was just selling your excess food. It was a remarkably better life when the average serf wasn't depending on money. Getting back to that setup will require huge culture shifts, namely, no longer taxing farmland and incomes. And you know what nobody wants to admit? People fought to preserve that. Nobody wants to fight to preserve the GDP of billionaires. And when times get hard, we'll have to face that reality. And he's responding to this post by Boring Business. The vilification of an identified job amongst this generation is absolutely fascinating to me. For God's sake, you're working in an air-conditioned office where you have to reply to emails and add or multiply a few numbers on Excel. Most people around the world would kill for that. Well, there's a lot more than that, but Boring Business is being out of touch. Now, this is important. My parents get on my case because I'm self-employed and I don't have an employer contributing to my Social Security, even though Social Security is another form of odious debt. But Sassafras 84 says this. Let's make this clear. Social Security isn't going broke. It's been robbed. Our money is being stolen. Democrats and rhinos are fully aware of it, which is why they're screaming like banshees at Doge. People need to go to prison for this. So many people need to go. So let's listen to this. Andy Biggs loses it on immigration. I'm- I think that's enough, but you get the idea. This is an immigration official. Social Security numbers have been used for fraud, essentially. So yeah, I think that counts as odious debt because that's identity theft for one thing. If it's being used on multiple applications for different immigrants, yeah. Now, Benny Johnson, posting on April 25th, says, breaking, Medicaid and Medicare Administrator Dr. Oz says billions of dollars in fraud are being exposed, worse than USAID. If you thought USAID was a problem, some of the issues that we are discovering will bring a little shiver to you. So, yeah, that goes right back to healthcare for illegal aliens because a lot of stuff that's happening now got to start earlier this year. That's why I'm including all these earlier posts, because so much fraud, both in government and in the private sector. There's fraud in the private sector because there's fraud in the government. Government has its finger on the scale in the private sector. Ooh, this is important. Wall Street Ape says, when Elon Musk's Doge team audits the Department of Defense, this needs to be looked at. Dr. Stephen Greer, founder of the Disclosure Project, exposes how the Department of Defense works with the military-industrial complex to create unaccountable money. They'll say an aircraft costs $2 billion to make. It really costs $150 million. The rest of it goes through the back door in these unsanctioned projects that neither the president or Congress knows, never mind the American people. Multiply that across the whole system. This is unelected deep state bureaucrats in action. I think that counts as Odie's set. So, yeah, Odie is dead. Now, this is what I think Andy Biggs was so worked up about. Proof of illegals getting social security numbers. Those that doubt Elon Musk and Doge, here's like 2 minutes of illegals admitting to me that they have social security numbers. This is Nate Friedman doing a man on the street report. Here, I'll read the subtitles in case you can't see it. Thank God they helped me get medical insurance, and most importantly, medical insurance. They have helped me to get my ID and helped me obtain asylum, work permit, and my social security card. Thank God I got my social security card and my work permit. And to get my social security and work permit, only when my wife and I passed to the border to apply for the work permit. I only received the work permit, while my wife received the. Trying to read it. Pass the text here. I can't read that. Her social security number and everything. Yes, I'm looking for the social. Yes, I got it, but I kept it inside the paperwork, and now I'm looking for it. When your papers arrive, one can register in the application. You have to put your social and the work permit. I'm paying to get that. No, here I mean the people who already have the social, they create the account and then rent it to us at a cost. For us to be able to get out to go to work. So that wasn't much help either because I had to pay for it. Which is the rental of the bicycle plus the rental of the application. So a lot of these people are debt slaves. Which are weekly costs, and so with one more, he had nothing left. So yeah, that was that. So yeah, I've heard of scammers. They create like fake IDs for illegal immigrants to work like Uber and DoorDash and Lyft. I don't know how they get around Uber because I drive Uber, and regularly I have to take a selfie to prove I am who I am. So, and that I'm the person on the Uber account. So I don't know how they get around Uber, but Lyft, I can see it. DoorDash, I can see that too. Harriet Hagerman on the Department of Education. Let's actually listen to the video. Congressman Harriet Hagerman. Nice. Oh, this is wonderful. The News says on April 2nd, Doge, how did the CEO of a private equity firm uncover millions of non-citizens with social security numbers in just days, while the Social Security Administration's own Office of the Inspector General, with years of full bureaucracy behind it, never found a thing? So Biden gave 5 million non-citizens social security numbers. Antonio Gracias, CEO of the $26 billion private equity firm Valor Equity Partners, has volunteered to assist Doge in exposing fraud, waste, and abuse within the Social Security Administration. Within days, his team has uncovered that over 5 million non-citizens have been issued Social Security numbers, and thousands of them were not only registered to vote, but had cast ballots in the 2024 election. So that's how ICE knows who to go after. People bitching about ICE are have to pretend that Elon never made a presentation about Social Security numbers. Nick Sorter, posting on March 9th, said, post video of here. He's quoting the video, so let's actually listen to the video. And they're implementing that now during the shutdown. Now's the time when we cut the waste. Humor the Democrats walked into a trap. Now, this is important. World Economic Forum, $52 million plus in USAID funds to the World Economic Forum were canceled, and Klaus Schwab formally steps down as per Reuters. This was April 3rd. The whole world saw your communist scams. The fourth industrial revolution, the elites must be aggressively drive their agenda home. Lots of people, including Razorfist, point out that communist revolutionaries tend to be rich people, not necessarily the working class, because rich people have the time, money, resources to actually start a revolution. And why do they start a communist revolution? Not for the benefit of the people, just to take power for themselves. Out the old boss under the new boss. Here comes the new boss, same as the old boss. Oh, this is important here. Deranged Maxine Waters badgers Jerome Powell about Doge. Let the real worry slip. We don't know what they have on us. Actually, let's actually listen to this and hear it from the horse's mouth. So Maxine Waters is a congresswoman. Jerome Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve, and he's the guy who Trump wants to replace. He's the guy who Trump calls too late Jerome Powell because he won't lower the interest rates. Jerome Powell is a suit if there ever was one. If Elon had access to our personal data, why did the government have it in the first place? Isn't that a violation of the Fourth Amendment? That's another reason why we got to change the financial system. Now, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is one thing. I mean, cryptocurrency all have the real ones anyway. They all have a public ledger, so there's transparency there. But at least it's decentralized. I mean, that'd be a good topic for another video, but I gotta think about that. Because I've heard that's one criticism I read on social media about Bitcoin, that it's another surveillance tool. But the benefit of Bitcoin and a stable coin is that it's not centrally controlled. I mean, I've talked about central bank digital currencies. Those are centrally controlled. Those are controlled by the government, central banks. Those are bad. Those are things that the government of the powers that be can turn off. Bitcoin and stablecoins are at least decentralized, so you have control of them. So there's that. And you can't be debanked if you have it on, if you store it on your own device. Brian Cates is responding to one of his own posts here. Let's read that one. I don't have that. But let's just read this. There's a possibility as to what Trump could be referring to. Act Blue's money laundering. So Act Blue is that Democrat funding platform. The fake news in both the left's fake news media matrix and the Con Inc. media complex, he's posting this on April 4th, are right now striving mightily to convince you that the kind of, sort of, maybe only illegal thing with Act Blue's shady donation is that they came from overseas from people who couldn't legally donate to U.S. political campaigns. Now, the left has finessed that kind of scandal before. I know because I covered it as a journalist back in 2012 when the Barack Obama insisted on leaving the CVC feature on its donation page switched off. CVC is that security feature on your credit card or your debit card, I think. This meant that there was no way to tell if the credit card making the donation was valid or if the person donating was American or foreign. The Obama campaign has also left the CVC feature switched off for the 2008 campaign. Once Obama had won, they simply paid a fine to the FEC. So, doing the exact same thing again after winning his re-election, in quotes, the Obama campaign simply ponied up the money for another Fed fine. Democrats did this twice, just with Obama. They have continued to do it only through Act Blue. Recall during this last election cycle, Act Blue was caught taking donations with the CVC turned off, and took Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton to taking them to court to force Act Blue to turn that CVC donation feature on, as law required. Now, as I said earlier, this looks bad. Yes, indeed, if they've been funneling money from foreign sources into our elections. But Democrats have finessed their way into this kind of scandal multiple times. However, due to recent revelations by Elon Musk and the Doge team in that unbelievably corrupt town of Washington, D.C., I'm beginning to suspect that perhaps a significant amount of the money that Act Blue was laundering to Democrats was not, in fact, money from foreign donors. That it was our own tax money looted from the U.S. Treasury? What if most of it was our own tax money looted from the U.S. Treasury? How, pray tell, would the Democrat Party survive that particular scandal? Share your thoughts in the comments. So, yeah, odious debt. Do we really owe that? No, we don't. How do we get out of that? I'm going to get to that at the end. I promise. Elon Musk says on February 28th, all government spending is taxation. This point really needs to be hammered home. Whatever is not directly taxed is taxed in the form of inflation as the government prints more money. Inflation is the worst tax of all, as it punishes those who are just barely making ends meet or have gathered some savings. Charlie Kirk, rest in peace, he said on February 25th, breaking, Ukraine has agreed to President Trump's requested mineral rights deal with the U.S. as compensation for the hundreds of billions of dollars America has invested. Kiev will contribute 50% of future mineral revenue to a joint fund. The deal comes without security guarantees. Zelensky is heading to the White House for the signing. The art of the deal. Well, okay, I covered that a few months later in my Save Ukraine from Zelensky video, but it just goes to show we didn't agree to money to Ukraine. We don't agree to money to a lot of countries, so government has to make the case. Amen. Oh, yeah, this is the post that Brian Case was making earlier. Brian Case had earlier said, could it be how many fake social security numbers were used to create totally fake voter registration forms that were then submitted to key county registrar's offices in the battleground states? And then how NGOs were paid with our own tax money to use those fake voter registrations to request real ballots by mail. Okay, let's see. He's responding to a muse. He says, they found something today that's incredible. That's horrible. It is horrible. You will find out very soon. What they found is incredible. Brian Case says, could it be how many fake social security numbers were used to create totally fake voter registration forms that were then submitted to key county registrar's offices in the battleground states? And then how NGOs were paid with our own tax money to use those fake voter registrations to request real ballots by mail, and how people at these NGOs then filled out those ballots and mailed them and returned them. And it turns out that these fake social security numbers started being created in 2010 or so, and then these fake social security numbers started showing up with the absolutely filthy battleground state voter rolls by 2012, and ballots were requested by mail and sent out and returned and counted and affected the vote totals in key federal races for federal office in, let's say, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024 elections. And Doge is going to be able to track all this federal multi-state RICO criminal conspiracy activity by simply using AI to track all the millions of fake social security numbers and cross-referencing how many were used for voter registrations when ballot requests that were sent out and then returned in the past 7 election cycles. Yeah, that'd be pretty horrible if that were that case. Odious debt. I would even call that an insurrection by upending the lawfully elected government of the United States. David Republican, posting on February 28th, says, I've had a change of heart on federal income tax. On the surface, it's just a way for the government to generate revenue. It has to get its funding from somewhere. But I now see that the method of taxation itself is fundamentally alters the relationship between the government and its people. When the government relies on taxing individual income, It shifts from serving its citizens to exploiting them as a revenue source. This dynamic creates an inherent friction, where the government no longer answers to the people, but the system that extracts from them. And if you look around, it's clear whatever our tax dollars are funding, it's not serving us. Odious debt. This is what modern economists fail to grasp when they dismiss tariffs, sales taxes, or luxury taxes as harmful. The structure of taxation matters, not just the amount collected. The income tax distorts governance itself, and it needs to go. And she's responding to Publius, saying, paying taxes in the USA is extremely unethical and immoral. Much more net harm done is good than with the money. I'm deciding whether I want to read this one by Joe Lang because it's long, but it's important. He says, for me, this is really simple. He's posting on February 25th. Don't listen to phony conservative politicians that pretend to care about cutting the deficit and acting like they're the saviors of the country. Why doesn't Trump care about the deficit and the debt? Why is Trump increasing the deficit? This should be obvious. Trump is calling for massive tax cuts for the American people. He's going to let millions of Americans keep more of their hard-earned money. This is going to increase the deficit big time. Why isn't Trump calling for cuts in government to offset the tax cuts? This is the difference between Thomas Massie and Trump. Trump is bankrupting this entire financial debt slavery system, and guys like Massie want to keep us trapped in the system. They want to cut spending, but they don't like to give the details or put their name on their own proposals. They just like to complain and finger point for clickbait. Where in government spending does Massie want to cut? Be specific. Is it entitlements? The benefits that Americans have paid into for years and deserve? Why doesn't Massie want Americans to keep more of their hard-earned money? Why does he want a big 45% tax increase on Americans because Trump's huge tax cut from his first term is expiring? The Massie types are voting against tax cuts for Americans. They're also voting for huge tax increases on Americans because they're willing to let the Trump tax cuts expire. They think they know better how to spend the American people's money. They don't. It's just politics. Pretend you're conservative and trying to save the country, but don't ever offer your own proposal. Trump knows the game. Don't forget, Massie supported Ron DeSantis. This no vote on Trump's agenda by Massie is completely predictable. I remember Trump describing Massie as a third-rate grandstander. Trump pegged this clown long ago. So yeah. There's that Antonio Gracias guy again. This is from Canico the Great. Billionaire Democrat donor Antonio Gracias, now working with Doge, says the Biden administration's border policies handed human traffickers $13 billion a year to bring in future Democrat voters. So, okay. I would consider that an insurrection. We gave $13 to $15 billion a year to human traffickers. That's what the system did. We looked at the voter rolls in our 4 states, and we found thousands of these people, non-citizens, on the voter rolls. And we found many of those people had voted. In one state in particular, we found well over 1,000 voted. Yeah, I think this is moved to import voters. So that's a 4 minutes clip. I'm not going to watch it, but yeah, we got the gist. Now, Joe Lang posting on February 26th. Joe Lang makes very long posts, as you notice, but they're very good. And I think the way he's grown on Twitter is making very long posts that increase the amount of time people spend on them. I need to start doing that. I like to make memes and make, little quips on Twitter. I need to get better at making long-form content. I have this rule where if you can't explain it to me, you don't understand it. But apparently the algorithm doesn't like that, so all right. This stream is 3 hours long, so we're getting close to the end. Trump's so brilliant. Did you catch what he did yesterday? It seems to have confused a lot of people, and the media doesn't know what to think about it either. What did Trump do? He announced that he's offering a new gold card with a $5 million path to citizenship. Did you catch the signal? Why is it so brilliant? Trump just told the world 2 things. Both go completely against the cabal's globalist agenda. Trump showed the world that he values American citizenship. He put that value at $5 million. No more invasions of illegal aliens, no more amnesty, no more open borders around the world. Trump is putting a value on citizenship. He's making citizenship great again. Whoever takes the offer will be contributing to the wealth of the American people. But did you get the other big signal? It's a gold card. Why is gold suddenly a big part of the narrative lately? Trump has recently said he wants to audit Fort Knox with Elon to make sure that the people's gold is still there. We all know how important that is. Gold shall destroy the Fed. A return to the gold standard is coming, and Trump keeps signaling its return to the world. The days of fiat money are coming to an end. So is the central bank's debt system. The enslavement of the people is going to end as we return to sound money. There's nothing the cabal can do to stop any of it. Patriots are in control. So the only thing that the cabal can do to stop it is to derail MAGA. And they're doing they're making a mighty effort on social media with all the anti-Semitism supposedly coming from conservatives, but I'm seeing a lot on Facebook and Instagram. I was seeing it earlier on Twitter, but it's getting cleaned up. A lot of people are clapping back on it. I think that's significant on a free speech platform like Twitter, X, so that's a good sign. Charlie Kirk, rest in peace, posting on February 26th. Let's just listen to the clip because body. Now, April 15th came and went. I filed my taxes. I feel dirty about doing it, but whatever. Whiplash 347, posting on March 30th, says President Trump has just frozen the IRS for 90 days, launching a full-scale investigation into fraud and government waste while preparing to fire 45,000 IRS agents. For decades, the IRS has been a weapon against the American people. Now that era is coming to an end. This move marks a direct strike against deep state corruption, targeting the bureaucratic machine that has drained the economy and punished taxpayers. No new audits will take place during the freeze, and the administration is set to dismantle the weaponized tax system once for all. Speaking of deep state corruption, on March 14th and 15th, 2025, the deep state's HARP was fully operational as it deliberately created devastating storms across the country that were executed with precision. All was covered up by the media and dismissed by the same compromised scientists who sold their souls decades ago. HARP stands for High Frequency Active Oral Research Program. That was in reality warfare from the sky for the purpose of population control through strategic displacement, forcing people into surveillance-controlled smart cities, crashing local economies, making people dependent on federal aid, destroying farmland, filling farm shortages, justifying female takeovers, and biometric data collection. Probably justifying the climate agenda too, because they can blame it on climate change. This satellite-based weaponized weather warfare was an engineered assault on the American people using advanced atmospheric weaponry hidden behind government lies. And there's more to come. Synthetic hurricanes targeting the Gulf, unnatural heat waves collapsing power grids, flash floods wiping out farmland, geoengineered droughts justifying water rationing. Unusual ionosphere heating patterns were detected days before. ELF, which stands for extremely low frequency pulses, matching HARP's operational frequency, spiked on March 12th and the 13th. Then the destruction began. 35 dead, thousands displaced, entire counties wiped out in Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma. Now the same system is targeting Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas. They've had weather modification technology since the 1960s. Just think what they have now. Since 1993, HARP has injected massive electromagnetic energy into the ionosphere, manipulating jet streams, wind currents, and pressure zones. Even the U.S. Secretary of Defense admitted in 1997 that climate manipulation was a weapon. They told you it was shut down in 2014. That was a lie. It went dark and became more powerful than ever. The deep state wants full control of the atmosphere and has integrated HARP with satellite-based energy weapons. Secret government satellites are mirroring Musk's Starlink system. What happened this week was a trial run. They are watching how fast you evacuate, how obedient you are, and how easily you surrender. Would you call that odious debt if we're paying for that? Clandestine posting on February 20th. Trump thinks of the gold in Fort Knox once again. We haven't heard a lot about Fort Knox. It's October right now, and we haven't heard much about Fort Knox. I think Trump's waiting for the right moment. And that might not come until after the midterm elections, but let's hear what he has to say. Clandestine says, why bring this much attention unless he already knows? Now, I think we covered earlier that central banks are buying, and other countries are buying a lot of gold. So they know what's coming up. Autism Capital, let's listen to this video. It's about the IRS. One next to someday. So yeah, just further evidence that we're getting rid of the income tax. David Burge responded to Janice Huff. Janice Huff says, I'm 65. Started paying into Social Security when I was 15. How about everyone else? P.S. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's our money. David Burge says, a Ponzi scheme is when you promise impossible benefits and returns to the first wave of investors, which you promptly pay with money from the second wave of investors, etc., until you run out of the nth wave of investors and it collapses. Social Security is textbook Ponzi scheme because right now the money I'm supposedly paying into Social Security is not going to my account. It's going to my parents' account or people older than me. That's what Social Security is. Odious debt. %70 of Americans support a full examination of government expenditures. This is from Harvard Cap's Harris poll. So if it's anyone else other than Rasmussen saying that 77% of Americans support Trump's agenda, it's more than that. Sean, posting on February 12th, did I just hear the White House press briefing question correctly? $2.7 trillion in improper Medicare and Medicaid payments to people overseas who weren't entitled to the benefit. This cannot be real. The entire national debt is $36 trillion. It's $38 trillion in October. $36 trillion. And you're telling me that you sent checks for $2.7 trillion to people overseas? I'm telling you right now, by the time we're done with these audits, we will find at least $36 trillion worth of waste, fraud, and abuse. The entire national debt is waste, fraud, and abuse. So that's the end of that. And that brings me to the end of this here. I promised a reason why we don't need to pay all this debt. I asked Grok, what is odious debt? This is calling all angels. The 14th Amendment, Section 4, says it all. 14th Amendment. It's in the Constitution. Section 4. The validity of public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties of services for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion should not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. This came after the Civil War. Any debts incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss of emancipation of any slave, shall be held illegal and void. So, what are we establishing? Doge is establishing a lot of fraud, is establishing voter election fortification, establishing a lot of waste in government that the people didn't vote for. Would you call that an insurrection? Would you call that an insurrection against the lawful government of the United States that the people voted for? Once we get through exploiting all fraud and establishing that there has been an insurrection against the United States, probably the United States corporation, how much of this debt will be canceled? What do we really owe? How much money of this, how much of this odious debt has been a finger on the scale of the private economy for corporations like Amazon and the big tech companies, the Magnificent Seven, the central banks that's supporting these Magnificent Seven in the stock market? How much of this odious debt has been supporting, systems that keep us down, regulations, keeping down startups and small businesses? How much of that is canceled? How much of that ought to be done away with, just erased? How do we accomplish this without triggering World War III? Because if the deep state players are willing to assassinate a peacemaker like Charlie Kirk, what else do they have up their sleeve? Do they have hostages? Do they have chemical weapons? Do they have nuclear weapons hidden somewhere? Do they have dead man switches? We got to be super, super careful. A lot of this stuff that we're dealing with shouldn't even be an issue. We shouldn't have to deal with this at all. Pray for discernment. Walk by faith, not by sight. Pray to God. Get into the Word of God. Read your Bible. Read from the Book of Psalms. If you want God to answer your prayers, you have to pray in agreement with God. You can find examples of such prayer in the Book of Psalms. Psalm 91 is particularly important because there's testimony that has saved people's lives. If Psalm 91 has been proven to save people's lives, think about all the other Psalms. Start with that, and you make that your foundation. I create a 24/7 live stream of selected Psalms and other things that I've composed, or other churches have composed, prayers for the nation. So go ahead and check that out on my Rumble, YouTube, and Kick channels. But I'll leave it there. I know I'm online right now. Let's see if I have any comments. No, it's like 6 a.m. So I'm going to wrap it up. If you want to support the channel, click on any of the affiliate links. I also accept donations on Cash App and in Bitcoin. And I hope you find this content valuable. If you find this content valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. And share with people you know and spread the word. I'm Nate Houseman, signing out and letting you know, more than ever, it's okay to stand up for yourself. Over and out.